Chapter 957. Wuxia immediately extended a finger from her black robe and wagged it playfully. Just 2 hours. I will be back within 2 hours. Don't open the door and let others see that I'm not here. Continue to talk and eat. No one will know that I'm not here. Finishing her words, she chuckled and leaped out from the window by the river. Hurry up and come back. The slightly older woman quickly exhorted again. Seeing that Wuxia had disappeared, she sat down and shook her head with a sigh. That man of hers. I remember that when he first met Wuxia and came to the Wu clan, many people in the Wu clan looked down on him. In the end, every time he appeared in the Wu clan, we realized that his cultivation was getting higher and his authority was getting heavier. Now, his cultivation is #1 in the world, and his authority is monstrous. But he seems to be a little too busy. I don't know if Wuxia is fortunate or unfortunate to be his woman. Anyway, it's no different from not having a man. Once this was said, someone immediately agreed. That's right. Actually, to us women, being able to be with our man every day isn't necessarily a blissful thing. For those who fight and kill outside all day long, so what if they obtain the entire world? Shui is a very good example. That Yu Qianqiu doesn't even have time to care about her. But in the eyes of many people in the Wu clan, whether Shui is happy or not is secondary. It's fine as long as Shui can be Yu Qianqiu's woman in name. After a sigh, the woman turned and asked the person who spoke earlier, if Yu Qianqiu is your man, or if you are Shui, would you be happy? That person's eyes immediately lit up. I want to. Unfortunately, it's impossible. Weren't you feeling sorry for Shui, just now and saying that it's meaningless for such a man to fight and kill outside all day long? Why are you thinking about it now? Pity is pity, and meaningless is meaningless. But if she finds a useless man who stays by her side all day long, wouldn't it be even more meaningless? Maybe one day when she gets bullied by him, she won't even be able to stand up for him. That's why I would rather feel empty and lonely when I'm alone in my room, as long as I can enjoy everyone's envious gazes when I come out. Look at Shui. Everyone in the world fawns over her. Whatever she wants, someone will immediately think of a way to get it for her. I'm so envious of her. Lass, you're thinking of love. When Shui comes back later, you can discuss with her and see if you can get Yu Qianqiu to accept you as his concubine. You're the concubine of the #1 expert in the world, hee. The group of women burst into laughter, and the room was instantly filled with laughter and scolding. Wuxia, who was wearing a gauze hat and a black robe, quietly flew over the old forest on the west side of Hat Island. She looked around behind the gauze curtain but didn't see anyone. She immediately shouted, I'm here. Is anyone here? The mountain range rose and fell, and the forest valley was secluded. Not even the sound of birds could be heard. The surroundings were too quiet, so quiet that it made people feel a little apprehensive. Especially the swaying shadows in the shade of the trees, it gave people an indescribable feeling of strangeness. She shouted, but no one answered. Wuxia muttered in her heart, could it be that he left because he didn't want to wait? So she shouted again, I'm here. Is anyone here? She didn't know that Shouchen, who was not far away, was looking at her. He was just scared by Wuxia's strange clothes. After being beaten by Yu Qianqiu several times, he became more vigilant. He was worried that it might be a trap. After confirming that the person was indeed Wuxia, he carefully looked around. Seeing that there was no one else, he let out a sigh of relief and dashed out. Wuxia didn't hear any response, and no one came out, so he guessed that the man might have left. He looked around and was about to leave. Suddenly, he saw a man standing on a treetop not far away from him. It was the man who had been drinking in the Gula house. She saw that the person looked at her and asked, Are you Miss Wuxia? Wuxia pulled the gauze curtain that covered her face up to her hat and revealed her face. She replied, Yes, I am. how should I address you? The person didn't answer her. Instead, he waved at her and said, follow me. After saying that, he turned around and flew into the depths of the forest. Is there anything that can't be said here? Wu Lixue shouted. She looked around and felt that it was a bit gloomy. In fact, it was because of the humidity in the forest. The person still didn't answer her and flew into the depths of the forest. Wu Lixue thought for a moment and realized that there was probably no one in the world who would dare to hurt him. In addition, he really wanted to know about Yu Qianqiu's situation. He gritted his teeth and foolishly flew after him. However, she was still a little vigilant. She kept a distance and looked back from time to time. When she saw that the whole Wu clan had become a small piece of land, she couldn't help but shout nervously, "Who are you? If you don't say anything, I'm going back." At this moment, the person in front of her went into the forest and disappeared. Wu Lixue stopped in the air and didn't know whether she should follow him or not. Suddenly, the person's voice came from afar again. "Come. Right here. I can tell you anything you want to know." Wu Lixue hesitated for a moment and continued to fly forward. Soon, she arrived at the place where the person disappeared. She saw that there was a huge empty space in the forest. It was bare rocks, and some weeds were stubbornly growing out from the cracks in the rocks. The person stood there with his hands behind his back, waiting for her silently. It was as if he knew that she would definitely follow him. Wu Lixue looked around and gritted her teeth. She landed behind the person and asked, "You said that you are Yu Qianqiu's friend. What's your name?" "Miss Shui, we've met a few times in the past. You might not remember me." Xiaofan slowly turned around and smiled at Wu Lixue. "I didn't expect Miss Shui, to still be so beautiful. You haven't changed at all. We've met in the past." Wu Lixue thought about it doubtfully. She felt that the person's eyes were a little familiar, but she couldn't remember where they had met. She shook her head and said, "Forget it. Didn't you say that you know where Yu Qianqiu is and what he's doing? Please tell me. I'm really happy to be able to meet Miss Shui alone here. Maybe it's because it's not easy to recognize me in this form. When I change back to my original form, Miss Shui will be able to remember who I am." Xiaofan clasped his hands together and pointed at his forehead. He shouted, "Appearance comes from the heart. Return me my true form." A wave of black mist immediately spread out and wrapped around his body. This strange scene caused Wu Lixue to take a step back in fear. At the same time, the crow that was resting on Wu Lixue's shoulder suddenly opened its eyes. It stared at the surging black mist with a sharp gaze as if it was facing a great enemy. Suddenly, the black mist shrunk and Yan Zhuixing appeared. He asked with a smile, "Miss Shui, do you still remember me?" "Ah. You." Wu Lixue stammered in horror, "You. You're Yan Zhuixing. Aren't you already dead?" She subconsciously took a step back. The grudge between Yu Qianqiu and Yan Zhuixing was known to everyone in the cultivation world. If there was anyone who dared to go against Yu Qianqiu in the cultivation world, it would be Yan Zhuixing. Wu Lixue couldn't help but be afraid. "Dead? Lady Shui, is looking down on me too much. Yu Qianqiu's little tricks aren't enough to kill me." Yan Zhuixing slowly walked towards the retreating Wu Lixue and said with a faint smile, "Miss Shui, we're old acquaintances. Are you afraid of me? You. Why did you trick me here?" Wu Lixue retreated in horror. Suddenly, she twisted her body and fled into the air. "Run? Since you're here, stay and accompany me." Yan Zhuixing opened his mouth and 7 devilish spirit snakes flew out quickly. In the blink of an eye, they caught up with the escaping Wu Lixue. They wrapped her tightly in the air and dragged her back like a stick. Wu Lixue, who was dragged back to the ground, struggled hard, but it was of no use. With her current cultivation, how could she get rid of Yan Zhuixing's devilish spirit snakes? The strange thing was that the crow on her shoulder was nowhere to be seen. However, Yan Zhuixing didn't care about a small pet crow at all. Seeing that she couldn't escape and Yan Zhuixing was approaching, Wu Lixue hurriedly shouted, "Help! Yu Qianqiu, help me!" The help didn't come, but Yan Zhuixing was shocked. He mistakenly thought that Yu Qianqiu was nearby. He quickly looked around and heard Wu Lixue crying, "Yu Qianqiu, where are you? Come and save Shui." He breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that this woman was crying for help with her only hope. In fact, Yu Qianqiu wasn't here at all. No. Yan Zhuixing's eyes were cold. So what if Yu Qianqiu was here? I'm going to settle the score with him anyway. There's no reason to be afraid of him. What are you shouting for? If you shout again, I'll let it get into your mouth. Yan Zhuixing shouted in a deep voice, and the demonic spirit snake that entangled Wu Lixue immediately stuck its head out. The ferocious snake head flicked its tongue in and out of Wu Lixue's mouth, and its red eyes looked cold and cruel. Women were born to be afraid of snakes. She was so scared that she didn't dare to shout anymore. She closed her mouth tightly, only her tears kept flowing out, and she kept shaking her head. Seeing that she stopped shouting, the snake's head slowly retracted. Yan Zhuixing's eyes swept slightly to the sky. He saw that the crow fluttered its wings and flew down from the sky. It landed on Wu Lixue's shoulder without fear and stared at him coldly. Its eyes were a bit like a human's, full of arrogance. Of all the things you want to raise, you raise a crow. You deserve to be Wu Lixue. You're different from ordinary women. Yan Zhuixing sneered. He walked to Wu Lixue and pulled off the gauze hat on her head. He threw it away casually. Then he pinched Wu Lixue's chin and slowly raised it, asking, "I don't understand. What's so good about that scumbag Yu Qianqiu? He left you here and didn't care about you at all. It means that he doesn't care about you at all. If it weren't for him, you wouldn't have suffered like this. I'm different. I've always cared about you. If you're willing to follow me, I promise you won't have to suffer anymore." Chapter 958. Woo Woo. Wu Lixue shook her head hard and got rid of the hand that was pinching her chin. "What? Do you hate me that much? Which part of me can't be compared to Yu Qianqiu, that villain?" Yan Zhuixing's hand touched Wu Lixue's face again and wiped the tears on her cheeks. "Your skin is so good. I really don't want to force myself on you, Shui. Promise to be my woman. I can give you whatever he can give you. I can give you whatever he can't. In short, I can give you whatever you want." Ugh. Wu Lixue bit on Yan Zhuixing's hand. She bit with all her might. However, Yan Zhuixing didn't react at all. He allowed Wu Lixue to bite his hand. His eyes gradually turned fierce. Suddenly, he pulled his hand back and slapped Wu Lixue's face. He shouted angrily, "Bitch! I gave you a chance, but you didn't want it. You asked for it." A palm print immediately appeared on Wu Lixue's face. Wu Lixue sobbed as she slowly turned her head around. Choking with pain, she said, "Yu Qianqiu, quickly come and save Shui." Her voice suddenly stopped, and two bewitching red lights suddenly flashed before her eyes. Her consciousness gradually sank, and she forgot the pain and everything. "Bitch!" Yan Zhuixing cursed with anger. As the bewitching red light in his eyes disappeared, his eyes were replaced by beast-like madness. He opened his mouth and the 7 demonic spiritual snakes immediately let go of Wu Lixue and went back into his mouth. He. Yan Zhuixing stared at Wu Lixue, who was standing in front of him obediently. His face was filled with excitement. He smiled sinisterly and said, "Yu Qianqiu, I want to see how you will react after your woman becomes my woman. Do you know? Your pain will be my greatest joy." Ha! He stretched his right hand to Wu Lixue's neck and broke the cloak rope tied to her shoulder. At the same time, Yan Zhuixing let out a cry of pain and dodged with a teleport. From the back of his right palm to his elbow, there were 5 bloody holes. Blood dripped down from the 5 fingers of his right palm. Yan Zhuixing looked at Wu Lixue in disbelief. The inconspicuous crow on Wu Lixue's shoulder was flapping its wings in front of Wu Lixue, as though it was protecting him. It was this inconspicuous crow that had taken advantage of his moment of carelessness to launch a sneak attack at lightning speed. If it weren't for his quick reaction, he would have more than 5 bloody holes on his body. Looking at the 5 bloody holes on his arm, Yan Zhuixing was very surprised. With the toughness of his demonic body, how could a small crow hurt him? Squinting his eyes to take a closer look, he immediately discovered that this crow was somewhat different from ordinary crows. There were 3 colorful feathers on its head, and the feathers were faintly glowing with a purplish-blue luster. Its beak and claws were golden in color, and its eyes were filled with a human-like charm. So it's a spirit beast. I was wondering why she would bring a crow with her. Yan Zhuixing's arm shook, and 5 strands of black miasma immediately gathered on the 5 bloody holes. After a while, the 5 strands of black miasma gradually shrank. In the blink of an eye, the 5 bloody holes on his arm disappeared, and the skin on his arm returned to normal. "You're courting death, beast!" Yan Zhuixing shouted coldly, and his 5 fingers formed a claw with black miasma. With a whoosh, he appeared in front of Wu Lixue and directly grabbed the fluttering crow, wanting to use his demonic claws to kill it. However, this crow was not to be trifled with. It opened its mouth and spat out an orange-red flame, which quickly enveloped its opponent. Yan Zhuixing did not care about a mere flame. Even if the flame enveloped him, he still wanted to use his demonic claws to take the life of the crow. However, Yan Zhuixing soon discovered that there was something wrong with the flame. Once he rushed into the orange-red flame, the black miasma that enveloped the demonic claws immediately let out a sizzling sound. Yan Zhuixing felt an unbearable pain all over his body, as though countless steel needles were pricking him. This flame could restrain his demonic technique? Yan Zhuixing turned pale with fright, and his figure quickly retreated from the flame. He did not know that this flame had a name, which was Phoenix Flame. It was not something ordinary flames could compare to. It specialized in restraining some evil things, and his demonic technique was no exception. This was because the crow's cultivation was shallow. Otherwise, with his cultivation, he would not be able to escape from the Phoenix Flame. The flame that was spat out by the crow's mouth quickly wrapped around its body, and the fire wings that extended out made it seem like the crow had turned into a dignified big bird. This kind of bird was very beautiful, and Yan Zhuixing had never seen it before. However, how could Yan Zhuixing be frightened by a strange bird? A gloomy expression appeared on his face as he sneered, "What a loyal little beast." Demonic fist. Before he finished speaking, he had already rushed into the flame like a meteor and punched out. Bang! The flame dissipated, and the crow could not dodge in time. It let out a miserable cry and was beaten into the deep forest. It was unknown whether it was dead or alive. After forcefully killing the crow, Yan Zhuixing snorted coldly, "Can't even withstand a single blow." He strode in front of Wu Lixue and grabbed her collar, wanting to tear off her clothes and do that beastly thing. However, at this moment, a weak female voice suddenly came from the deep forest, "Sister Shui, I can't beat him. Run, run. There's someone." Yan Zhuixing was shocked, and quickly looked over. He saw the crow that was sent flying wobbly for a while before landing on the ground and bouncing a few times. Then, it flew up again and landed on the ground and bounced a few times. It was spitting out a human voice with blood on its mouth. The one who spoke was this crow. It can actually speak? Yan Zhuixing felt it was strange. He had never seen an animal that could speak in the human world, and it was a clear and melodious female voice. Looking at the fluttering crow, Yan Zhuixing's lips suddenly curled into an evil smile. He looked at Wu Lixue and said, Shue's figure is really not bad. I have never seen it before. Shui, take off your clothes and let me have a look. However, to Yan Juixing's surprise, Wu Lixue stood there with her brows slightly furrowed. She did not have any reaction at all. Yan Juixing was a little surprised and stunned. He had never seen anyone disobeying his command when he was controlled by his demonic eyes. He immediately shouted, "Take off your clothes. Take them off." As soon as he said that, Wu Lixue's expression immediately became extremely painful. She seemed to be doing something intense in her heart. Damn it! Yan Juixing's expression twitched. He had never encountered such a strange thing. With a ferocious expression, he lost his patience. He raised his arm and was about to do it himself. However, before his hand touched Wu Lixue, he saw a ball of faint light suddenly burst out from Wu Lixue's body. It wrapped around Wu Lixue and kept shining, as if it wanted to avoid all evil. As soon as the light shone on Yan Juixing's hand, Yan Juixing immediately let out a strange cry. There was a bone-piercing pain from his palm. It was simply unbearable. It was 100 times more painful than the fire that the crow spat out. Yan Juixing didn't dare to touch the light again. He quickly retreated and dodged. He looked at Wu Lixue in shock. He couldn't figure out what was going on. Wu Lixue, who was wrapped in the light, still had a pained expression on his face. However, as the light pulsed, a group of faint light spots gently surged out of Wu Lixue's body. Those light spots were sparkling and translucent like little 7-colored stars, sparkling delicately. After a while, countless colorful light spots surged out and gathered into a dreamy galaxy, wrapping Wu Lixue in it. At this time, Wu Lixue was as holy as a dreamy goddess. She was in a dreamy world, which made Yan Juixing dumbfounded. The colorful nebula seemed to feel Wu Lixue's pain, so it separated a wisp and went into her nasal cavity as she breathed. The pain on Wu Lixue's face immediately eased. After a while, the colorful nebula came out again, but it was wrapped in a wisp of wriggling mist like a red nematode. The red mist struggled desperately, as if it wanted to get back into Wu Lixue's nasal cavity. However, the 7-colored nebula did not intend to let it go at all. As soon as it was wrapped up, it immediately formed an unpredictable orbit like the nebula in the night sky, and immediately crushed the red mist into nothingness. At that moment, Wu Lixue's eyes slowly opened. Her eyes were clear and bright. She looked around at her surroundings in a daze. She didn't know what had happened, but the nebula around her was really beautiful. Yan Juixing's body trembled. He found that his control over Wu Lixue seemed to have been removed by an unknown magical power. His mouth was dry and his throat moved. He said, as expected of the Shui, that I like. You are indeed not comparable to ordinary women. Today, I must have you. Yan Juixing immediately raised his demonic arts to the limit. Who knew that as soon as he flashed over, he saw a colorful nebula like a rock spreading its wings. An aura that made his heart palpitate forced him to retreat subconsciously. Damn it! Yan Juixing looked at the surging colorful nebula fiercely. He couldn't imagine that he would encounter such a strange thing. He actually couldn't get close to Wu Lixue. After the 7-colored nebula collided with Yan Juixing just now, it immediately changed. It surged and transformed into the shape of a big dreamy bird, wrapping Wu Lixue in it. Its feathers fluttered in the air, looking very beautiful. It was exactly the same as the firebird that Yan Juixing saw before. However, it was bigger, and its lifelike majestic aura was far better than the crow just now. The colorful nebula on the bird's head condensed a pair of phoenix eyes that stared coldly at Yan Juixing. An ancient and vigorous aura gradually became dignified. It was an indescribable noble aura. It was like an eternal royal family was looking down on a lowly ant under its feet. Its expression was so disdainful. The fluttering crow that was said to have feet that didn't touch the ground seemed to be stunned by the scene in front of it. Then, it seemed to have thought of something and cried out. It flapped its wings on the ground and shouted, "It's the Phoenix Cloud Robe. Sister Shui has the Phoenix Cloud Robe to protect her." Chapter 959. Who knew that it would be too happy and fall into a small puddle with an "aya" sound? It really confirmed what it said before, it didn't have a good ending once it landed on the ground. However, it jumped out of the puddle like a drowned rat and shook its feathers. It was still full of energy as it shouted, "Phoenix Cloud Robe, Phoenix Cloud Robe." What was the Phoenix Cloud Robe? Yan Zhuixing looked suspiciously at the jumping crow. To be honest, he was quite impressed with this crow. It didn't die even after taking a devil punch from him. Looking at the big bird flapping its rainbow nebula wings, Wuxia seemed to be flapping its wings to fly to the eternal stars of the universe. "I want to see whether your Phoenix Cloud Robe is stronger or my devil blade is stronger." Yan Zhuixing sneered. A cold crescent moon flashed out and floated behind him. It swayed faintly and caused the surrounding air to tremble. A cold blood-red light flowed on the curved blade, and the ancient black magic patterns also exuded an ancient aura, suppressing the crows by the puddle and causing them to shiver in fear, looking at the cold and merciless crescent moon in horror. Yan Zhuixing pointed with his cold eyes. The crescent moon behind him immediately turned into an arc of light and shot out like a cold lightning. There was no movement at all. It was so sudden that there wasn't even a ripple in the air. In the blink of an eye, it had already slashed at the noble neck of the big rainbow bird. At this moment, a pair of dreamy starry wings folded in front of it and silently blocked the crescent moon. The crescent moon struggled in the nebula. It was as if it had fallen into a ball of cotton, unable to exert its strength. "It's only a so-so." Yan Zhuixing waved his arm and spread his fingers. The crescent moon effortlessly spiraled out of the nebula. The two starry wings were immediately cut into countless glittering spots by the crescent moon. Even the big bird's head was smashed into pieces. Wuxia retreated in fear. The scattered rainbow-colored spots gathered back and returned to the big bird in the blink of an eye. He. It can't even withstand a single blow. The crescent moon flashed back. Yan Zhuixing had tested his opponent's limits with a single strike. He clicked his tongue and laughed, "This Phoenix Cloud Robe might be a good item, but you don't seem to know how to control and use it. He. Don't make any more pointless resistance. If I want to kill you, it'll be as easy as flipping my hand. Obediently obey me and I'll suffer less. Sister Shui, Don't you know how to control the Phoenix Cloud Robe?" The crow desperately flew towards Wuxia. Wuxia shook his head in horror, indicating that he really did not know how to control it. "Let me try to help you and see if there's any way." The slowly flying crow suddenly froze in the air. "Little Sister Phoenix." Wuxia suddenly let out a cry of surprise. She covered her mouth with both hands and looked at the scene in front of her in disbelief. She saw that the black crescent moon's sharp hook had pierced into the crow's abdomen and pierced through it. The crow was hanging on the sharp hook as it slowly lowered its head in shock to look at its abdomen. "Sister Shui, I'm so scared. I can't move." The crow spread its wings but was unable to fly. It seemed to be abnormally panicked. The crescent moon flashed back and Yan Zhuixing indifferently grabbed the crow hanging on the demonic blade. He looked at it before casually throwing it in front of Wuxia. He sneered, "Shui, don't force me to make a move. If you don't obey me, then this crow's fate will be the same as yours." The crescent moon quickly arrived in front of Wuxia as if it was making a final ultimatum. He was feeling a little depressed now. He did not expect that his demonic eye would be unable to control Wuxia. If Wuxia did not obey him, he would have to use force. The crow laid on the ground weakly and raised its head, saying in a stutter, "Sister Shui, think of a way to find the bad guy. He has a way to save me." It could not even catch its breath as its head fell to the ground. its eyes slowly closing, and it breathed no more. "Little Sister Phoenix!" Wuxia cried out in grief. She seemed to think of something and she kept muttering, bad guy, find a bad guy to save you." She frantically rummaged through her storage bag. The bad guy that the crow was talking about was none other than Yu Qianqiu. It had always called Yu Qianqiu a bad guy. Wuxia suddenly remembered that Yu Qianqiu had given her a few small silver balls and told her how to use them. Yu Qianqiu said that if she wanted to find him, she could use these silver balls to contact him and he would rush over as soon as possible. She grabbed the few silver balls in her hands and quickly injected her divine sense into them. She held them in front of her chest and prayed with tears streaming down her face, Yu Qianqiu, where are you? Come and save little Sister Phoenix. Come and save Shui. Yan Zhuixing did not know what she was holding in her hands and praying crazily. He sneered, Shui, my patience is limited. In the World Chamber of Commerce in the Immortal Realm, Yunnan Tian and Yu Qianqiu were sitting face to face in a small conference room on the 21st floor, discussing something. After listening to all the information that Yunnan Tian had inquired about, Yu Qianqiu fell into deep thought. He then knocked on the table with his 5 fingers and said, there is something that you need to pay more attention to. Although we don't have the ability to participate in the ranking conference, we still need to find a way to get a pass to the netherworld. So you need to pay more attention to whether there are any declining sects that are selling a pass to the netherworld. We need to buy one in preparation to go to the netherworld. Yunnan Tian could not help but smile bitterly. Now that the Heartless Palace is watching us so closely, I'm afraid that even if we get a pass to the netherworld, we won't have a chance to go to the netherworld. Humph. It is precisely because of the threat of the Heartless Palace that we need to get this thing as soon as possible. There are 2 reasons. Yu Qianqiu stretched out 2 of his 5 fingers that were knocking on the table and said, the sects in the Immortal Realm are constantly sending people into the netherworld, so it is obvious that the netherworld is a place to make a fortune. This is indisputable. Yunnan Tian nodded, and then he heard Yu Qianqiu say, this is the first reason. The second reason is that I want to find my master in the netherworld. This Heartless Palace is really too troublesome. It binds us in the hallucinatory immortal city and we can't go out to do things. With our strength, we can't go against it, so I have to ask my master for help. Damn it! Let the old man directly flatten the Heartless Palace, then everything will be over. I don't want to be long-winded. By Changchun. Yunanshan's eyes lit up. That old man was definitely a powerful person of his generation. He was the guy who dared to challenge the Emperor of the Underworld and shocked the 3 realms. If they really found him, it should be easy to flatten the Heartless Palace. The Heartless Palace could not be more powerful than the Emperor of the Underworld, right? The most important thing was that if everyone had Bai Changchun as their backer, then many things would be easy to do. His idea was good, but he didn't know that Yu Qianqiu had no confidence in finding Bai Changchun. Even if he did find him, Bai Changchun might not help. This was because the old man probably had no interest in the Heartless Palace. The only thing that could interest him in the Immortal Realm was probably the Immortal Emperor medal. In short, the reason why Yu Qianqiu said this was to encourage Yunnan Tian, so that he would try his best to find some clues about the Netherworld token as soon as possible. After Yunanshan's excitement, he thought of reality and said hesitantly, this thing might not be easy to get. Every sect wants as many Netherworld tokens as possible. I'm afraid that the tokens in the hands of those declining sects have long been targeted by other sections. I'm afraid that they would be taken away by other sects before we get to buy them. As long as there is news, there will naturally be a way. Yu Qianqiu's finger paused on the table and he sneered, to think that a small merchant association like the 4 Links Chamber of Commerce could think of a way to get the Netherworld token. We are much stronger than the 4 Links Chamber of Commerce in the past. There is no reason that they can get it, but we can't. Yunnan Tian knew that he and Mu Bing of the 4 Links Chamber of Commerce had a grudge, so this matter would probably not be resolved peacefully. He nodded and stood up, saying, "Okay, I understand. I will go find out about the Netherworld token." Seeing that Yu Qianzhou didn't say anything, he cupped his hands and left. Mu Bing. I hope that your son-in-law can protect you for a lifetime. Don't give me a chance to make a move, or you will cry. Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes and snorted. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and also stood up to leave the conference room. When he reached the 22nd floor, he saw that Wei Chuanxiu was still sitting cross-legged in front of Bai Suzhen's door. Yu Qianzhou pushed open the door and entered another room. The floor of the room was filled with fist-sized yellow-skinned spider eggs. They were the eggs of the temple rainbow spiders from the God Ruin realm. After Yu Qianzhou closed the door, he carefully walked among them. From time to time, he would pick one up and look at it. Through the light, he could see that the spider inside was already so big. It was constantly moving its 8 claws in the liquid inside the sphere. It looks like it's not far from hatching. I'm afraid it's not suitable to raise them here. When the time comes, the entire World Chamber of Commerce will be crawling with spiders. Yu Qianzhou muttered as he held the spider eggs in his hand. Finally, after much consideration, he decided to put them in the God Ruin realm. Once these 1,000 or so spider eggs hatched, it would be enough to equip over 1,000 people. Moreover, there was enough food in the God Ruin realm. If he could find a way to speed up the reproduction rate, then everyone in the army of nearly 10,000 would be able to carry a temple rainbow spider. Presumably, the power of battle would be greatly increased. Once he had a plan, he had to carry it out. Just as he was about to transfer all the spider eggs in the room to the God Ruin realm, Yu Qianzhou was suddenly startled. He frowned and said, "It's Shui-er. Why is she looking for me? No, she seems to be very agitated. Did something happen?" Yu Qianzhou was shocked and instantly disappeared from the room. "Shui-er, it looks like you won't agree no matter what. Good, very good. Maybe using force will have a different taste. You forced me to do this, don't blame me." Yan Zhuixing let out a cold laugh. Wu Lixue immediately retreated in fright. She hugged the silver balls with both hands and said with a trembling voice, Yu Qianzhou, Yu Qianzhou. You're here." She suddenly exclaimed as she looked behind Yan Zhuixing. Yan Zhuixing was startled, and then said with a sneer, "Shui-er, don't you think it's too childish of you to play this diversion trick in front of me? I advise you to obey me, lest you suffer more when I use force. At that time, don't blame me for not showing mercy to the fairer sex." Chapter 960. Before coming here, Yu Qianzhou had suspected that something had happened to Wu Lixue, but he never expected that such a thing would happen. There was actually such a bold madman in the world who dared to make his woman submit to him. Did he really think that it was a joke that he had spent so much effort to monopolize the power of the world? Who was the one with the problem in his head? Yu Qianzhou looked at Wu Lixue, who was shivering in the dreamy nebula, and got furious. He suddenly looked at the back of the person in front of him and found that the person was wearing clothes that were one size smaller than his body size. His arms and legs were exposed. How could an ordinary person come out to meet others like this? Yu Qianzhou couldn't help feeling a little depressed. It seemed that it was really a crazy guy. Forget it. Killing him could be considered as getting rid of the evil in the world. Which idiot came here to court death? Yu Qianzhou shouted angrily and was about to kill the person with a palm. There was really someone behind him. Yan Zhuixing was shocked. He didn't even notice that someone was behind him. He was so scared that his scalp went numb. He suddenly moved away and the crescent followed him like a shadow to protect him. After dodging, he looked at the person. Yu Qianzhou. Yan Zhuixing. After the two of them saw each other's appearance, they almost let out a cry of surprise at the same time. Yu Qianzhou didn't even think about why Yan Zhuixing would appear here. His first reaction was to check Wu Lixue's condition again. Through the dreamy nebula that slightly hindered his vision, he saw that there was a faint palm print on Wu Lixue's tearful face. Naturally, it wasn't Wu Lixue who slapped herself. It was needless to say who did it. Wu Lixue was actually slapped by Yan Zhuixing. Yu Qianzhou's expression changed abruptly and instantly turned greenish-black. His anger rushed to his brain. At this moment, he couldn't wait to destroy the world. He couldn't vent his anger without killing. Yu Qianzhou, he killed Sister Phoenix. Wu Lixue knelt on the ground sobbing, hugging Crow's body in her arms as she sobbed, not saying a word about being beaten up. As soon as Yu Qianzhou arrived, she immediately felt that she had someone to rely on. The dreamy nebula that shrouded her also seemed to feel safe. After hovering for a while, it slowly shrank back into her body. Yu Qianzhou's heart was already riddled with holes because of Wu Lixue's crying. It was not an exaggeration to say that his heart was being cut by a knife. He did not care whether the crow was dead or alive at all. His murderous aura burst out uncontrollably. He pointed his finger at Yan Zhuixing and said, "Are you still King man? Why do you keep finding women to kill? I'll CK your ancestors. Who do you think you are? It's the same here." Yan Zhuixing waved his hand casually, and the crescent moon appeared in front of him like a ghost, ready to strike. "I can wear out iron shoes in fruitless searching, only to find what I'm looking for without even looking for it. I was just thinking about how to lure you out and kill you. I didn't expect you to deliver yourself to me. Very well. Since you're here, don't even think about leaving. The grudges between us are written off today. Hook your mother. Don't even think about leaving today." Yu Qianzhou spat. Seeing that Yan Zhuixing was not afraid at all after seeing him, he immediately calmed down. Yan Zhuixing must have something to rely on. After a closer look, he immediately found that Yan Zhuixing's cultivation had actually increased to the soul formation final stage. He could not help but be shocked by the magic of demonic arts. Not only did a person who was beaten into a pulp and turned into ashes by him revive, his cultivation could also skyrocket. If he was allowed to continue developing, it would be a great disaster. The scene of Yan Zhuixing being rescued by a ball of mysterious black light surfaced in Yu Qianzhou's mind. That scene made Yu Qianzhou deeply apprehensive. That bastard was the successor of a demon god. What if he was saved by the mysterious black light after he was killed? Did he have to be wary of this bastard every day? "Bastard, you can't leave this time." A fierce look flashed across Yu Qianzhou's face. He remembered that Immortal Crocodile had once said that the divine sword should be able to deal with that black light. This thought flashed quickly in his mind. Yu Qianzhou had an idea in his mind, and his eyes suddenly focused on the crescent moon floating in the air. He had seen Xiao Wuyuan use it in the 100 Flowers Valley, so he naturally knew what it was. He immediately narrowed his eyes and snorted coldly. "Black Moon Pagoda? Great! I was right. The 10,000 demons are quite bold. They actually dared to go against me. Humph. You really deserve it. Black Moon Pagoda?" Yan Zhuixing suddenly laughed wildly and waved his hand in high spirits. He said proudly, "I might as well let you know when you die. This thing should be called the Demon Blade. It is a divine weapon personally refined by the demon god countless years ago. Countless experts from the 3 realms have died under it. Yu Qianzhou, do you dare? A divine weapon personally refined by the demon god." Yu Qianzhou was slightly surprised, but he immediately swung his arms. A violent wind behind him fluttered his robes, and his entire body burst out with dazzling purple light. 10,000 purple flying swords soared into the sky from his back like a purple dragon soaring into the sky. A valiant prowess that could intimidate one's soul spread out in an earth-shattering manner. Subsequently, the 10,000 purple flying swords rapidly formed a formation with lightning speed and surrounded Yan Zhuixing in the blink of an eye. Let alone the demon god, even the heavenly king can't save you today. Yu Qianzhou revealed a sinister smile and said, Shui, retreat to a distant place first. Wait for me to kill this bastard that only knows how to bully women. This was the first time he used the purple flame flying swords without any scruples. Furthermore, he released 10,000 at once. It was obvious that Yan Zhuixing had touched Wu Lishue's bottom line, and he wouldn't be able to vent his anger if he didn't kill Wu Lishue. Just as Wu Lishue was hugging the dead crow and flying back while wiping her tears, there were several sharp whistles that echoed from the Wu clan's direction. In a blink of an eye, over a dozen individuals flew over rapidly. Yu Qianzhou and Yan Zhuixing turned their heads to take a look and saw Wu Sihai leading the Wu clan's elders and elders over. There were still people arriving one after another. The various factions' people were also alarmed by the commotion of Yu Qianzhou releasing the 10,000 swords. They all rushed over to see what was going on. When Wu Sihai and the others saw that it was Yu Qianzhou and Yan Zhuixing, they were astonished. Wu Lishue immediately rushed to her grandfather in tears and recounted how she was bullied. All of you, retreat further away. Yu Qianzhou yelled out sternly and took the initiative to make a move. The 10,000 purple flame flying swords immediately turned into 10,000 rays of purple light and shot towards Yan Zhuixing. Yan Zhuixing was shocked by the thunderous power, and he immediately felt that his cultivation was far inferior to Yu Qianzhou's. He immediately opened his 5 fingers toward the demonic blade, and with a roar, he soared into the sky toward the countless purple flying swords that were coming at him. The demonic blade floating in front of him suddenly erupted with a boundless ferocious aura. It spread out in all directions and suddenly became a dozen meters long. With a whoosh, it hovered above Yan Zhuixing's head. It spun rapidly like an umbrella, opening a path for Yan Zhuixing who was trying to break out of the encirclement. Dang dang dang. A series of explosions pushed the countless purple fragments in all directions. In the blink of an eye, Yan Zhuixing forcefully broke out of the dense net of swords. The flying swords that missed him hit the ground with a boom. Dust and smoke rose up and a huge pit was blasted out by the purple flame flying swords. Yu Qianzhou was secretly shocked. It was indeed a godly weapon refined by a demon god. Even the purple flame flying swords couldn't hurt it at all. Instead, it destroyed quite a lot of them. Seeing that the flying swords couldn't do anything to him, Yu Qianzhou spread his arms. Countless purple fragments and flying swords flew towards him and were all kept into his sleeves. His entire body seemed to have turned into a stream of light and shot towards Yan Zhuixing who was in the sky. Since treasures didn't work, he didn't need to rely on treasures. He believed that it wouldn't be a problem for him to deal with Yan Zhuixing with his current cultivation. Yan Zhuixing, who was floating in the inner arc of the crescent moon, spread out his 5 fingers. The crescent moon immediately expanded to 100 meters. It was tangible and it wasn't just an illusion. A majestic and ferocious aura was emitted like a hazy gray fog. A breathtaking blood glow flowed on the giant crescent moon blade. It was as though there was an invisible giant hand holding a butcher's knife, eyeing the vast land covetously and wanting to slaughter. The crowd, who had been shocked by the aftershock of their battle, turned around and looked at the scene in the sky in shock. They thought to themselves that Yan Zhuixing indeed had something to rely on since he dared to challenge Yu Qianzhou again. Within the inner arc of the giant crescent moon, Yan Zhuixing looked at the charging stream of light without any change in expression. He spread out his 5 fingers again and charged towards Yu Qianzhou fearlessly. The crescent moon of the demonic blade immediately flashed in front of Yan Zhuixing. Yan Zhuixing hid in the inner arc of the demonic blade. The hearts of the crowd in the distance immediately jumped to their throats. They saw the giant crescent moon blade slash down from the sky, and the stream of light that Yu Qianzhou had transformed into was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. He overestimated himself and ran to commit suicide. Wu Lishue, who was watching the battle, bit her lips tightly. Her face was pale from nervousness. Break! Yu Qianzhou shouted angrily in the sky. He pushed out his palm and faced the demonic blade that was slashing towards him. He used the metal art, intending to shatter it. However, he immediately realized that something was wrong. The demonic blade was enveloped by an invisible power. The metal art couldn't penetrate it at all. There was nothing he could do to it. He was shocked and quickly dodged with a teleportation, narrowly avoiding the giant demonic blade that was slashing towards his head. Boom! The earth trembled violently. The giant demonic blade directly sank into the ground, tearing a huge crack that was thousands of meters long on the spot. Before the smoke and dust could disperse, the light that was hundreds of meters long quickly shot from the ground to the sky. Like a sky-splitting axe, it chased after Yu Qianqiu in the sky. Yu Qianqiu turned into a stream of light and dodged. Then, he suddenly disappeared in the sky. Yan Zhuixing was shocked to see that he had lost his opponent's target. He closed his eyes and pointed between his eyebrows with 2 fingers. The sharp edge of the giant crescent moon suddenly changed direction. Where the sharp edge pointed, it forced Yu Qianqiu to appear in the middle of teleportation. He almost sent himself to the blade. What a nimble speed! Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath. He didn't expect such a huge guy to change so quickly. It was actually faster than his teleportation. He wanted to use the speed of teleportation to instantly approach Yan Zhuixing and kill him, but the demonic blade easily stopped him. Chapter 961. However, Yu Qianqiu swore to kill him and naturally wouldn't stop. He immediately vanished from the sky and used instant shift to attack from all directions. However, the devil blade's speed of transformation was simply unbelievably swift, and it protected Yan Zhuixing at the center as it spun like a ball. Everywhere its edge pointed, it forced Yu Qianqiu to appear from all directions, and he was utterly unable to approach Yan Zhuixing. Such a situation gave Yu Qianqiu a feeling that he was committing suicide by charging at his opponent's blade. Meanwhile, Yan Zhuixing was like the axis of a sphere and was safely in the center. The devil blade would naturally help him resist all external threats. What made Yu Qianqiu most angry was that Yan Zhuixing was actually hiding in the center with his eyes closed to defend. Yu Qianqiu might know that Yan Zhuixing was concentrating on controlling the devil blade, but it still infuriated Yu Qianqiu. Yan Zhuixing was simply condescending. Many of the spectators in the distance looked at each other in dismay. Everyone saw that Yu Qianqiu couldn't do anything to Yan Zhuixing, and this result was indeed out of everyone's expectations. Many people were even guessing that the divine weapon in Yan Zhuixing's hand was only used for defense and hadn't displayed its offensive prowess yet. If Yan Zhuixing was to use the divine weapon to counterattack, would Yu Qianqiu be able to block it? If Yu Qianqiu was defeated, then the entire cultivation world situation would be reversed. Perhaps Yan Zhuixing would replace Yu Qianqiu's position. Once this thought was born, everyone's expression immediately changed unpredictably. The Wu clansmen, led by Wu Sihai, had an abnormally grave expression. The relationship between the 4 major clans and Yu Qianqiu was well known in the cultivation world. If Yan Zhuixing won, the 4 major clans' end would be obvious. Naturally, there were also disciples of the 10,000 demons on Hat Island. When the disciples of the 10,000 demons saw this scene, they looked at each other with a hint of excitement in their eyes. Anyone could tell that the divine weapon in Yan Zhuixing's hand was the Black Moon Pagoda in the hands of the previous sect master, Yan Wuchen. Yan Zhuixing had used the Black Moon Pagoda to challenge Yu Qianqiu. His relationship with the 10,000 demons was self-evident. Once Yan Zhuixing defeated Yu Qianqiu, then the 10,000 demons, the hearts of the 10,000 demons' disciples couldn't help but beat wildly, but they didn't dare to show the slightest flaw on their faces. After all, no one could guarantee victory until the end of the battle. The few of them were afraid of being seen through by others, so they couldn't help but secretly look around, only to discover that there were already many people glancing at them faintly. Regardless of the final outcome, everyone could see that Yu Qianqiu was indeed worthy of being the world's #1 expert. His cultivation was obviously much higher than Yan Zhuixing's. Otherwise, Yan Zhuixing wouldn't have to hide in the crescent moon and not dare to come out to fight. Everyone present only knew that Yu Qianzhou's cultivation was very high, but no one knew that Yu Qianzhou's cultivation had actually broken through to the immortal realm. Even Yan Zhuixing himself didn't expect that Yu Qianzhou's cultivation would be so much higher than his. At first, he was worried that the Devil Blade wouldn't be able to block Yu Qianzhou, so he focused on controlling it. Now, he realized that he had underestimated the power of the Devil Blade. He could completely block his opponent effortlessly, so he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. The two fingers that were pressed together on his eyebrows loosened, and his eyes slowly opened. He looked at Yu Qianzhou, who was facing a wall in all directions, and sneered. "Yu Qianzhou, is that all you have? Are you at your wits' end? If that is the case, then it will be my turn to attack. I will let you prepare yourself so that you will be convinced of your defeat and understand who is the true number one expert in this world." Yan Zhuixing's tone was undoubtedly insolent, and everyone's heart jumped when they heard it. They all silently thought that Yan Zhuixing still had an attack that he hadn't revealed yet. Could the battle that would decide the fate of the cultivation world be decided? Everyone in the Wu clan got nervous as they didn't know if Yu Qianzhou could block Yan Zhuixing's counterattack. Yu Qianzhou stopped his ineffective attacks and appeared in the sky. Even though he had reached the immortal realm, the continuous instant shifting was extremely tiring for him. Jiang Yi glanced at Wu Lixue, who was nervously grabbing his clothes, and suddenly stared at Yan Zhuixing. He spoke indifferently, "I just wanted to test the Devil Blade's power. I gave you some face, but you still took advantage of me. In my eyes, you are just like a chicken or a dog. You don't even have the qualifications to be my opponent, and you actually don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Truly pathetic and laughable. Fine. I will let you die earlier and reincarnate earlier. I can't be bothered to talk to you." A pale golden radiance flashed by, and a pale golden quaint longsword landed in his hand. Yu Qianzhou raised the longsword in his hand and wiped the edge of the blade gently while letting out a soft sigh. Even when he was in the immortal world, he had never used this divine sword. He didn't expect that the first time he used it would be against Yan Zhuixing. If it wasn't for the Devil Blade that was left behind by the demon god in Yan Zhuixing's hand, Jiang Yi wouldn't use it so easily. Yan Zhuixing squinted his eyes and took 2 glances at the longsword in Jiang Yi's hand. When he didn't see anything special about it, he immediately sneered and said, "You are the type of person who wants to save face and suffer. If I were you, I would either admit defeat obediently or run for my life. If you are trying to boost your courage by putting on airs, it will be truly pathetic and laughable." As he spoke, he looked at the spectators and continued to boast, "How do you want to die? I will grant your wish." Right now, he was full of ambition and wanted to use this battle to wipe away his previous humiliation, to intimidate the world, and to establish his position as the number one expert in the world. "You will grant my wish?" Yu Qianzhou seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. He pointed the longsword in his hand and sneered, "You are indeed a frog at the bottom of a well who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Block my sword first, and then we will see if you are qualified to say such nonsense." With a loud shout, Yu Qianzhou teleported and disappeared again. The crescent blade that was protecting Yan Zhuixing suddenly pointed in one direction and forced Yu Qianzhou to reveal himself again. Yan Zhuixing was just about to ridicule Yu Qianzhou, but before he could say anything, he saw the sword in Yu Qianzhou's hand suddenly erupt with an ancient aura that looked down on the world, and it rushed over like a raging wave. The Devil Blade that was protecting him immediately let out a rapid buzzing sound to warn him. Yan Zhuixing had a bad feeling and his pupils suddenly contracted. He saw the longsword in Yu Qianzhou's hand suddenly become a 100-meter-long longsword. The ancient longsword was covered with a glass-like golden flowing light. "Get lost!" Yu Qianzhou's thunderous roar resounded in the air. A huge longsword swept out and hit the Devil Blade directly. Boom! A loud sound exploded in the air, and an almost tangible airwave spread rapidly like a shock wave. The devil blade that was shining brilliantly just now couldn't withstand a single blow. It was hit by the huge longsword directly and became a black dot in the distance. The attack of the godly sword broke the impenetrable defense of the devil blade on the spot. It was completely a heavy blow without any tricks, and it won fair and square. Everyone around gasped. This attack immediately burst the bubble in some people's hearts. There was no need to guess who was stronger and who was weaker. Die! Yu Qianzhou's roar resounded in the air again. In his hand, the longsword was as light as a willow in the wind. It drew a huge golden lotus in the air and wrapped around Yan Zhuoxing. Yan Zhuoxing's insolence had already been replaced by paleness in the face of the majestic huge longsword net. He was immediately scared out of his wits. Even the devil blade couldn't block the opponent, so it was even more impossible for his body to block the attack. However, the only direction he could dodge was behind him, so he teleported to escape without hesitation. However, it seemed to be a bit too late. With Yu Qianzhou's cultivation and speed, coupled with the fact that it had happened so suddenly and carried a hint of a sneak attack, how could he retreat safely? Pooh! A leg flew in the air with a splash of blood. A fierce look flashed across Yu Qianzhou's face. He was determined not to let his opponent go. With a shake of his arm, the longsword cut off Yan Zhuoxing's leg, and the broad longsword slammed towards Yan Zhuoxing, who was in a panic. The momentum seemed to want to smash Yan Zhuoxing into a meat patty. Devil fist! Yan Zhuoxing, who couldn't escape in time, roared in grief. He desperately punched towards the sky and directly hit the longsword. Boom! Yan Zhuoxing screamed miserably, and the sound of bones shattering could be heard. One of Yan Zhuoxing's arms was swaying like a piece of meat, and he violently vomited a mouthful of blood. His entire body was slammed towards the ground like a meteor. Bang! The ground shook, and a sizable pit appeared. From the sky, one could vaguely see Yan Zhuoxing vomiting a few mouthfuls of blood. It was obvious that he was seriously injured. However, the might of the devil fist couldn't be underestimated. It was actually able to resist the divine sword's attack and didn't die in one hit. However, how could the divine sword be so easily blocked? It might be as light as a willow catkin in Yu Qianzhou's hand, but it weighed 108,000 kilograms. In addition, when Yu Qianzhou wielded it, it was imaginable how powerful the attack was. The huge change in the blink of an eye caused everyone to tremble with fear. The Wu clansmen were extremely excited, while the disciples of the 10,000 demons were terrified. Die! Yu Qianzhou's desperate cry rang out, and the divine sword in his hand was thrown down from the sky with the might of thunder. It stabbed straight towards Yan Zhuoxing, who was struggling in the deep pit. Right at this moment, a huge black light burst out from a distance and directly collided with the divine sword. It was the devil blade that was knocked away earlier that came back to save its master. Boom! The divine sword was knocked askew, and when it stabbed into the ground, it deviated from the deep pit by a few dozen meters. Yu Qianzhou took a quick glance and couldn't help but exclaim that the divine weapon refined by the demon god was truly extraordinary. It wasn't damaged by the divine sword's attack, and it was only knocked away. If Yan Zhuoxing's cultivation was a little higher, the might of the sword would be even greater, and the devil blade might be able to fight against the divine sword. The devil blade saved its master, and it immediately won a chance for Yan Zhuoxing to catch his breath. It protected Yan Zhuoxing and flashed out of the pit together. Yan Zhuoxing reached out his claw and directly sucked a leg that fell from the sky. It was the leg that was chopped off by the divine sword. At this moment, how could Yan Zhuoxing not understand that he wasn't a match for Yu Qianzhou? He almost didn't hesitate to crush his severed leg into a blood mist and cried out miserably, "Blood escape." Trying to run? Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly and suddenly pulled out the giant divine sword that was stabbed into the ground. It instantly shrunk into a flying sword and turned into a golden stream of light in the direction that Yu Qianzhou pointed at. It shot into the expanding blood mist. Ah! There was a miserable scream from inside. Chapter 962. The flying sword flew back to Yu Qianzhou's hand with lightning speed, and the expanding blood mist rapidly collapsed. After all the energy was exhausted, it condensed into a blood scab and fell. The surroundings were empty, and Yan Zhuixing's figure was nowhere to be seen. He escaped. Yu Qianzhou's eyes widened with rage as he quickly scanned the surroundings. Subsequently, he turned into a stream of light and chased after Yan Zhuixing. In just a short moment, everyone saw Yu Qianzhou going back and forth in all directions. It was obvious that he was searching for the escaped Yan Zhuixing. After a long time, a high-speed stream of light scuttled back in front of everyone. Yu Qianzhou appeared with an ashen expression and wasn't in a good mood. Everyone couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. It was needless to say that Yan Zhuixing had escaped. Wuxia asked with a grave expression, "What happened? Did he escape?" He couldn't help but be worried. Everyone had seen Yan Zhuixing's capability earlier, and if he was to make a comeback, the Wu clan would inevitably suffer a calamity. Yu Qianzhou kept the divine sword in his hand and nodded with a gloomy expression. That blood escape is truly strange. No one was able to detect the direction he escaped to. I wonder how he was injured by the sword earlier, but with the mystical power of his devil art, I don't think he will die. I wonder where he is hiding after he is severely injured. It will be great if we can find him and kill him. Wu Sihai spoke with concern. Yu Qianzhou seemed to have recalled something after hearing the statement. He looked at the faint palm print on Wu Lishue's face and suddenly glared at the 10,000 demons' disciples in the crowd. Those disciples were so frightened that they slowly retreated to the back of the crowd. Who knew that Yu Qianzhou would let out a cold snort and clawed at the air with his fingers? Ah! There were miserable screams, and a few bundles of white smoke exploded in the crowd. This action immediately frightened the disciples of the various sects, causing them to flee in panic. A few ferocious dried corpses fell straight down. Before they could even land on the ground, they had already crashed into the old trees in the forest below. Their bodies were already smashed into pieces, and they could not be more dead. Everyone immediately gasped and looked at Yu Qianzhou with lingering fear. It was the first time they had seen such a terrifying method of killing people without leaving a trace. Wu Sihai and the others were no exception, and all of them were extremely shocked. To them, this scene was even more terrifying than the scene of Yan Zhuixing being heavily injured. Everyone finally remembered that if Yu Qianzhou wanted to kill them, he could do it as easily as lifting his hand. He wouldn't even need to expend any effort. Wu Lixue was so frightened by the terrifying scene that he closed his eyes, not daring to take another look. "Do you like watching a good show?" Yu Qianzhou looked at the crowd coldly and said, "I'm not in a good mood right now. If you don't want to die, scram." Once the statement was out, the various sects' disciples immediately ran away, leaving only the Wu clansmen. Wu Sihai lamented in his heart. The current Yu Qianzhou was no longer the scum of the cultivation world that everyone wanted to beat up. He looked at the empty surroundings and said, "Yu Qianzhou, this isn't the place to talk. Let's go back to the Wu clan first." Among everyone present, he was probably the only one who had the qualifications to order Yu Qianzhou around. It wasn't because of his identity as the Wu clan head, but because he was Wu Lishue's grandfather. However, Yu Qianzhou let out a cold snort and said, "There is no need. I have something to ask you. How did Shui get brought here by Yan Zhuixing, and the rest of your Wu clan did not know about it?" As he spoke, his merciless gaze swept across the entire Wu clan, causing everyone to feel uneasy. "Yu Qianzhou, I wanted to come out on my own." Wu Lixue immediately told the story of how she was tricked by Yan Zhuixing to come out. She also begged for her sisters who helped her out of kindness. Yu Qianqiu was startled. Once this last spoke, he really couldn't bear to pursue the matter. He then asked, "You are saying that Yan Juixing can change into someone else's appearance?" Wu Lixue nodded while Yu Qianqiu frowned. No wonder he saw Yan Juixing wearing clothes that were a size smaller than a normal person. So this was the reason. After some consideration, Yu Qianqiu looked at Wu Sihai and the others and said, "As long as Yan Juixing isn't dead, Shui won't be safe in the Wu clan. I want to bring Shui away. As Shui's elders, what do you think?" A trace of joy flashed across Wu Lixue's face. She looked at the Wu clan members uneasily. She naturally wanted to stay by Yu Qianqiu's side. The Wu clan members looked at each other. Wu Sihai smiled awkwardly and said, "As long as Shui and her parents agree, the rest is up to you. We naturally won't have any opinions." Although he said that, he knew that since Yu Qianqiu had made a decision, it would be difficult for others to interfere. Hence, he turned around and gave a few instructions to the person behind him. Not long after that person left, he brought Wu Lixue's parents, Wu Huaqian and Zhu Xuanqiu. When they heard that their daughter was almost killed by Yan Juixing, they were terrified. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu came in time to save her. When they heard that Yu Qianqiu wanted to bring their daughter away for her safety, the couple felt that it should be so. They believed that no one in the Wu clan could protect their daughter from Yan Juixing, and their daughter would only be safer if she followed Yu Qianqiu. However, they were reluctant to part with her, so the couple kept reminding Wu Lixue to take care of herself. After some instructions, the mother-in-law, Zhu Xuanqiu, looked at her son-in-law, Yu Qianqiu. Wu Huaqian knew his wife's temper, so he immediately pulled her back. However, Zhu Xuanqiu broke free and warned Yu Qianqiu coldly, "Yu Qianqiu, if my daughter didn't follow you, she wouldn't have been harmed by Yan Juixing. So, I don't care how capable you are. If you dare to mistreat my Shui, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Do you hear me?" As the saying goes, a mother-in-law was very confident in teaching her son-in-law a lesson. It was perfectly justified. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He finally experienced the power of the legendary mother-in-law in his previous life. He didn't even say a word and didn't even have a chance to explain. She immediately taught him a lesson. She was even scarier than Yan Juixing. Yu Qianqiu's arrogance of being the world's number one was instantly swept away by his mother-in-law. He bowed awkwardly and said, "No, no. Take care." He was trembling with fear and did not dare to stay any longer. After bowing to the couple, he immediately pulled Wu Lixue, who was bowing to him, and turned into a stream of light, disappearing without a trace. He no longer had the confidence to deal with Yan Juixing. The remaining Wu clan members looked at each other and the angry Zhu Xuanqiu. They suddenly felt it was a little funny. They didn't expect Zhu Xuanqiu to scare Yu Qianqiu to the point that his face changed color. In the depths of the southern sea purple bamboo forest, Wu Lixue, who had her eyes closed, was pulled by Yu Qianqiu. When she opened her eyes, she saw the unusually beautiful purple bamboo swaying in the wind. The fresh air, which was filled with spiritual qi, and the pieces of purple bamboo leaves that were floating down, simply made one feel relaxed and happy. Wu Lixue asked curiously, "This is the legendary southern sea purple bamboo forest?" Yu Qianqiu replied with a "n." He saw that she was still holding the dead crow in her arms, so he pulled it over to take a look. When he realized that it was already dead, he casually threw it into the bamboo forest. He then comforted Wu Lixue with a sigh, "The crow can be buried in the purple bamboo forest after its death. I believe its spirit will be happy if it knows about this." Wu Lixue stared dumbfoundedly at the crow that was thrown aside like a bone. After being speechless for a while, she hurriedly ran to pick it up. She hugged it in her arms and tears flowed down her cheeks. She choked and said, "Sister Phoenix was killed by Yan Juixing because she wanted to save me. Before she died, she said that you can save her." Yu Qianzhou scratched his head. He thought to himself, how could a dead thing be saved? However, he couldn't bear to make Wu Lixue sad again, so he smiled apologetically and said, all right, I will try my best to think of a way. Give it to me. It's so ugly for a beauty to hold a dead thing in her arms. He walked over and was about to grab the dead crow in her arms again. Who knew that Wu Lixue would be scared by his throwing it away like a bone? She immediately kept it in her storage bag and said cautiously with tears rolling down her face, I will give it to you when you think of a way to save her. He. All right, I will do as you say. Yu Qianzhou was a little gloomy as he pulled her towards Bamboo Lang Paradise. Along the way, this simple-minded girl looked around at the wonders of the purple bamboo forest. Her tears finally dried up, which made Yu Qianzhou let out a sigh of relief. Under the bamboo signboard at the entrance of Bamboo Lang Paradise's courtyard, Nongzhu crossed her arms and looked at the two people walking out from the bamboo forest path. She was obviously alarmed by the conversation between the two people in the bamboo forest. Her expression didn't look good. Behind her stood a smiling Furong and a wide-eyed Ze. Wu Lixue, why are you here? Ze cheered and immediately ran towards the two people. She hugged Wu Lixue. Nongzhu was slightly surprised. She didn't expect Ze and Wu Lixue to know each other. Her expression became slightly better. Wu Lixue, who came to this legendary place, was a little nervous. Now that she saw Ze, an old friend of the Wu clan, she immediately became happy and lively. The two women chatted continuously. When Furong walked over and intimately hugged Yu Qianzhou's arm, Wu Lixue's cheerful voice immediately stopped. Ze was the only one who could not stop chattering. Yu Qianzhou's forehead immediately broke out in cold sweat. He didn't dare to look back. He. Nongzhu stood at the entrance of the courtyard and blocked the way with her arms crossed. She sneered and said, What? You brought another one back? How many more are you going to bring to my place? Damn it! Are you trying to embarrass me on purpose? Yu Qianzhou immediately coughed and changed the topic very seriously. Yan Zhuixing is not dead. I fought with him again before I came here, but he still escaped. The sneer on Nongzhu's face immediately disappeared. She said with a serious expression, What happened? Seeing that the topic was successfully changed, Yu Qianzhou immediately told her what happened in detail. Unknowingly, Nongzhu also stepped aside, and they walked into the courtyard. The Black Moon Pagoda in Old Devil Yan's hands is actually a divine weapon and a devil blade personally made by the devil god? Nongzhu let out a cold breath. After a long time, she came back to her senses and asked in a deep voice, That guy is a great threat to the human world. What are you going to do? Chapter 963. Yu Qianzhou looked at Furong and Wu Lixue. He didn't answer the question. I'm most worried about them. I'm here to bring them back to the immortal world. He was now reflecting on the painful experience. He would rather take the risk of the girls not getting along with him to bring them back. Otherwise, it would be too dangerous for them to stay in the human world. Moreover, Yan Zhuixing could change his appearance. It was simply impossible to guard against him. If one of the girls fell into his hands, he might not be able to save them in time every time. After all, Yan Zhuixing was not a fool. If something happened to him, he might regret it for the rest of his life. The girls looked at each other. Nongzhu frowned and said, The immortal world is not peaceful. The Heartless Palace is eyeing you covetously. Is it convenient to bring them there? There shouldn't be any big problems in the illusionary immortal city. At least it's safer than the human world. Yu Qianzhou glanced at Ze and said, You and Ze should go too. I've fought with Yan Zhuixing before. He does have some tricks up his sleeve, especially the demonic blade in his hand. I'm afraid you're not his opponent now. For safety's sake, let's leave for now. Yes. Yes. Ziyi's eyes were sparkling as she nodded to persuade her master. Nongzhu glanced at her angrily and knew what she was thinking. However, when she looked at the purple bamboo forest around her, she hesitated. Obviously, she couldn't let it go. After all, the purple bamboos here were his favorite. Yu Qianzhou knew what she was thinking. He smiled and said, "Aren't the disciples of Southern Ming nearby? Let them take care of it for now. When the time is right, everyone can come back. There's nothing to worry about." Nongzhu nodded and said, "That's all we can do." After a short discussion, they decided to leave immediately without further ado. Nongzhu flew away to look for the disciples of the Southern Ming Empire. Yu Qianzhou, on the other hand, headed straight for the backyard of Zhu Lang Blessed Land. Yu Qianzhou came to the door of a bamboo house that looked like a stilted building. Just as he was hesitating whether he should push the door open or not, the bamboo door opened with a creak. The allure seductress held the door with one hand and looked behind him to make sure there was no one behind him. She leaned against the door gracefully and looked at him with her bright eyes, which made Yu Qianzhou's heart palpitate. He coughed and said, Are you used to living here?" The allure beauty covered her mouth and giggled. She then asked with a smile, "Are you here to see me and say goodbye? Or, are you wondering if I'm among the people you're taking away?" Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou was stunned. Obviously, Nongzhu had already woken up from her meditation. The distance between the front and the back of the yard was not big, so it was not difficult for her to overhear the conversation between Yu Qianzhou and Nongzhu. Obviously, she had heard what she should have heard. "Did you hear all of it?" Then he said with a wry smile, "Yan Zhuixing already knew the relationship between you and me. When we were in Lingfang Valley, he used you to threaten me. It's not safe for you to stay in the human world. You'd better leave with me." The allure beauty stretched out her arms and touched her hair. Then she shook her head with a smile and said, "I won't leave." "Why?" Yu Qianzhou frowned and said, "It's not too late for you to come back after I find a way to deal with that guy. Please believe me. I'm just leaving for a while. You can come back later if you want." "Of course I believe you. If I didn't believe you, I wouldn't have abandoned my sect and everything to follow you to the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea. Now I'm alone and have no one to rely on. Who else can I trust except you?" The allure beauty winked at him and said. She really couldn't stand it. Yu Qianzhou turned his head to avoid looking at her face. He made way for her and said, "You go to the front yard and meet with them. I'll go wake Yan Yu up. We'll leave together later." He thought she had agreed. Unexpectedly, the allure beauty shook her head slowly and said, "You guys go." "I won't go. Anyway, I'm alone and have no one to love me. If Yan Zhuixing kills me, then so be it. That way, you won't pity me and I'll be a burden by your side. I don't want to be someone else's burden." Yu Qianzhou looked back and was speechless. What was she talking about? He then said with a wry smile, "Aren't you just saying that out of anger? Did I offend you in some way?" The allure beauty tilted her head and looked at him curiously. She blinked her eyes and said, "Don't you know where you offended me? This woman really knows how to rub my sore spot." Yu Qianzhou felt guilty. Why did he feel that this woman was leading him astray again? So he pretended to be at a loss and shook his head repeatedly. "I really don't know." The allure beauty sneered and said, "Okay, then come in and I'll tell you." She stretched out her jade-like arm and directly grabbed the clothes on Yu Qianzhou's chest. She forcefully pulled him in and closed the door. She then set up a soundproof enchantment in the room. She straightened her chest and pressed Yu Qianzhou step by step. "Why don't you continue to pretend?" She had already thrown caution to the wind. She knew that if she didn't take this opportunity to force Yu Qianzhou to break the window paper, it would be even more difficult in the future. After thinking about it for all these years, she finally understood that the past was in the past. She was still the allure beauty who dared to love and hate. Why should she be bound by invisible constraints and be entangled in the middle of the night when no one was around? So she resolutely decided to be herself. At the same time, she also decided to tear off the hypocritical mask of that lecherous but cowardly guy. Everyone had a clear understanding of the matter. There was no need to face hypocrisy with a conscience. What she liked was what she liked. What did it have to do with others? Of course, it took a lot of courage to make such a decision. It was difficult for her to make up her mind alone. It was someone else who really made her make this decision, and this person was in the bamboo house next door. Especially after hearing the conversation between Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu, that person immediately came up with an idea to let her threaten Yu Qianqiu at this time. Yan Yu, who was sitting cross-legged, slowly opened her eyes after the two people next door entered the room and stopped moving. She smiled bitterly and shook her head. She had seen many things between men and women in the dormant spring house. In this aspect, nothing could be hidden from her eyes. After getting along with the allure beauty for a long time, she naturally found out the secret of the allure beauty. Otherwise, why did the allure beauty go to the cornucopia to find Yu Qianqiu in the dormant spring house? It should be known that the more unruly a woman looked on the surface, once she fell in love with a man, she could really do anything. She could die with just a word. This kind of woman could not afford to be hurt. If it was just the wishful thinking of the allure beauty, she would not have fanned the flames. No woman liked her man to have many women. However, she also saw the guilty conscience hidden in the bottom of Yu Qianqiu's heart. If he was open-minded, why would he have a guilty conscience? It was only because of some special reasons that he didn't dare to take even half a step out of line. Finally, there was the scene next door. Yan Yu didn't know whether she had done a good deed or if she had done something stupid. In fact, she knew in her heart that the reason why she did this was not because she was willing, but because of her inferiority due to being born in a brothel. In addition, she cared too much about Yu Qianqiu and was afraid of losing him. She just wanted to please Yu Qianqiu, but why was there a trace of bitterness in her mouth that was difficult to swallow? Yu Qianqiu had never been so afraid before when he saw the allure temptress's large breasts pressing against him. He retreated in a panic until he was forced to the wall and had nowhere to retreat. He raised his hand and smiled bitterly. "I surrender. I surrender." "Stop right there. What do you want?" Seeing his trembling appearance, the allure beauty was angry and funny at the same time. She bit her red lips and said, "In the past, I would go wherever you told me to go, and I would not say anything if you took me, but today, I want a reason. Why do you want me to listen to you like this?" With a cold expression, Yu Qianqiu put down his hands and stood up straight. He said indifferently, "Don't get the wrong idea. You and I have known each other for a long time. I just don't want Yan Zhuixing to use you to threaten me. There is no other meaning. It is not what you think at all." These words should be enough to hurt a woman's heart, but the allure beauty did not take it seriously. She asked with a smile, "What else?" Under such pressure, Yu Qianqiu could not pretend anymore. He said with a bitter smile that he also wanted to avoid, "The biggest reason is naturally because you are my master's wife. I have the responsibility and obligation to protect your safety. Go to hell." Hearing this, the allure beauty flew into a rage. She directly grabbed Yu Qianqiu's lower body with one hand and grabbed his penis. Yu Qianqiu was so shocked that he almost forgot about the pain. His nerves were numb for 3 seconds. Immediately, he was in so much pain that tears almost came out. He shouted, "Stinky bitch, quickly give me your hand. You are King crazy. Quickly let go. If you don't let go, don't blame me for being rude. There is no good man, especially a perverted man like you who has no guts. You are a good-for-nothing even if you are alive. The allure beauty did not loosen her grip on his lower body. Instead, she increased her strength. She gritted her teeth and said, I have already shamelessly sent myself to you. Why are you still pretending? How many days have you known Hao Sansi? When I broke up with Hao Sansi, I don't even know if your grandfather was born. Since when did you become a filial son and disciple to care about my affairs? A useless man like you is useless in his lower body. It is better for me to castrate you myself and cut off my future thoughts. You are crazy. Yu Qianzhou roared. His body suddenly emitted green flames, wanting to force the other party to retreat. However, the allure beauty had already thrown caution to the wind. Enduring the unbearable pain, she clenched her teeth and closed her eyes. She shook her head and said, if you do not give me a reason today, I will not let go even if I die. If you have the ability, then kill me. King let go. Ouch, it hurts. It hurts. Yu Qianzhou really wanted to force out the purple flames and burn the devil's claw that was grabbing him. However, he could not bear to do that. Ouch, he gave in and said, tell me, what kind of reason do you want? Chapter 964. Not long after, a faint red mist rose from Hai Wei's head. It had a slight smell of blood, and it slowly dissipated into the air. Not long after, Hai Wei slowly opened his eyes. When he saw Yu Qianzhou in front of him, he recalled everything that had happened. His forehead was instantly covered in sweat. He turned around and knelt in front of Yu Qianzhou. He said sorrowfully, this subordinate deserves to die. I have failed Mister's trust. Whether I deserve to die or not, we can talk about it later. Tell me what happened first. Yu Qianzhou said calmly with a fishing rod on his shoulder. In fact, Hai Wei and the others did not know his real secret, so he had nothing to worry about. After Hai Wei told him everything that had happened, Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly. If that's the case, I'm afraid that Mo Xiaojun, Tian Yi, and Li Qiuxiang's situation are similar to yours. He did not expect Yan Zhuixing to be so vigilant that he could discover Hai Wei and the others. Before coming here, he had only refined the awakening pill to make complete preparations. As for whether or not someone had been controlled by Yan Zhuixing, he could not guarantee it. However, with his methods, Hai Wei was no match for him. After a slight test, he immediately revealed his true colors. It was even more impossible for him to escape from him. This subordinate not only delayed Mister's matter, but also harmed my own brothers. This subordinate deserves to die. Please punish me, Mister. Hai Wei knelt there with a pale face. All right. It's not your fault. It was my own negligence. How could you be a match for Yan Zhuixing? Get up. After calling Hai Wei, who was repeatedly thanking him, to his feet, Yu Qianzhou looked coldly in the direction of the 10,000 demons. He then took out a jade talisman and crushed it. A faint glow quickly dissipated in the air. Not long after, Hai Wei abruptly raised his head and looked to his left and right. He saw streaks of light flying past his head at an extremely fast speed, fanning out in the direction of the 10,000 demons. Just as he was about to say something, Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and said, "Come and meet me at Xiaojuan's place." Seeing Yu Qianzhou's nonchalant expression, Hai Wei immediately understood that the group of experts flying over his head were Yu Qianzhou's men. Alarmed, he cupped his hands and said, "Yes." By the time he raised his head, Yu Qianzhou had already disappeared. His guess was right. These people were indeed Yu Qianzhou's men. They were the 3,000 people that Yu Qianzhou had brought from the hero army that he had trained in the Divine Ruin Realm. After Yu Qianzhou gave the order, the 3,000 immortal experts, who had already surrounded the 10,000 demons, immediately moved towards the 10,000 demons. Their purpose was to flatten the 10,000 demons. Perhaps sending such a powerful lineup to deal with the 10,000 demons was making a mountain out of a molehill, but he was here to completely flatten the 10,000 demons. If he sent other forces in the human world, he was afraid that there would inevitably be fish that slipped through the net. Apart from wanting to cut off all of Yan Zhuixing's external help, he also wanted to use the thunderous momentum of quickly raising the myriad demons' palace to intimidate the others. This was to prevent people from not being able to see the situation clearly and secretly assisting Yan Zhuixing. At the same time, the Green Gang and the Hong Gang had already sent out a large number of people, mobilizing and joining forces with various sects to clean up all the disciples of the 10,000 demons in the Chinese cultivation world and search for Yan Zhuixing. Sikong Ju of the World Chamber of Commerce had also used the huge network of the World Chamber of Commerce to pass on Yu Qianzhou's decree to the forces of various countries. Any disciple of the 10,000 demons would be killed without mercy, and Yan Zhuixing would be rewarded with 10 billion high-grade spirit stones if he was found and reported. All the news would also be fed back to Yu Qianzhou at any time through the huge network of the World Chamber of Commerce. What was even more extreme was that because Yu Qianzhou knew that Yan Zhuixing needed the blood of virgins to cultivate the demonic arts, he issued an order to the world that no matter where, once a woman was found to have disappeared or died for no reason, the local forces must immediately investigate the cause of the disappearance or death, or else they would be severely punished. From this, it could be seen that Yu Qianzhou clearly wanted to force Yan Zhuixing to death this time, and he would not stop until he killed him. As a result, many people sighed endlessly. Nowadays, there was absolutely no one else in the whole world who could mobilize such a huge force at any time except for Yu Qianzhou. As expected, Mo Xiaojun and Hai Wei both ran away after being probed by Yu Qianzhou, but he was caught by Yu Qianzhou on the spot with his fishing rod. By the time Hai Wei arrived, Mo Xiaojun, who had woken up after taking the spirit awakening pill, was so scared that he was sweating profusely and begging for forgiveness. Yu Qianzhou did not say much. He looked at the two of them and said, "You two go to the 100 Flowers Valley and meet me." After that, he directly flew in the direction of the 10,000 demons. When he flew to the 10,000 demons, the encirclement had already come to an end. All the buildings of the 10,000 demons had been turned into ruins. Not a single intact building could be found, and there were corpses everywhere. Think about it, even if all the disciples of the 10,000 demons joined forces, how could they be a match for 3,000 immortal experts? It was a massacre without any ability to fight back. Where the multicolored lights were concentrated, miserable screams could be heard incessantly. Yu Qianzhou quickly flew over, and when he saw the hundreds of people huddled in front of a cave, he said to Zhang Peng, who was commanding the battle, "Stop for a moment." The black-masked Zhang Peng quickly gave the order to stop the attack, and the 3,000 masked immortal experts immediately stopped and surrounded the place. Among the hundreds of people of the 10,000 demons, there were Yan Wuchen and Yan Bugui, the palace master of the 10,000 demons, Buyun Shao, the elders, consecrators, and disciples of the 10,000 demons, as well as Man Hu and his martial brothers. Third brother Xian was also among them. One by one, the battered and exhausted people suddenly realized that their ferocious opponents had stopped attacking. They trembled with fear and felt a little surprised. When they looked around, they immediately noticed that Yu Qianzhou was floating in the air, staring at them coldly. "Yu Qianzhou, the 10,000 demons have no enmity with you. Why did you kill us like this?" The palace master of the 10,000 demons, Buyun Shao, pointed his sword at the sky and roared in anger. Countless disciples of the 10,000 demons had died, and now the entire 10,000 demons was going to end in his hands. How could he not be angry? "Humph." Yu Qianzhou said indifferently, "Don't tell me you don't know why." Buyun Shao, who was still about to roar, was pulled back by his master, Yan Wuchen. Yan Wuchen, whose clothes were ragged and his face was covered in blood, shook his head and laughed miserably. "I was worried that such a day would come, but I always held on to a trace of hope. I didn't expect this day to come so soon. Unfortunately, he didn't listen to my advice. So much so that I implicated the entire 10,000 demons. I am the sinner of the 10,000 demons. He then pulled his son, Yen Bugui. The father and son looked at each other without saying a word. Only the winner was the king, and the loser was the bandit. The sad wind messed up the blood-stained white hair of the father and son. Yen Wuchen suddenly looked up at the sky and said, "Yu Qianqiu, for the sake of our friendship, let the rest of the 10,000 demons go. Everything was caused by my Yen clan, and it has nothing to do with anyone else. Please let the disciples of the 10,000 demons go. They didn't know anything. As long as you let them go, my father and I are willing to commit suicide in front of you." "Master, don't!" Bu Yun Xiao and Qiu Wuyuan screamed at the same time. The rest of the 10,000 demons looked at the father and son with resentment. It was impossible to say that they didn't hate them, even if Yen Wuchen was the previous sect leader. Corpses were everywhere on the ground, and the sky was clear, with only a few white clouds drifting by. Yu Qianqiu, who was floating in the air, stared at the ground and sneered, "Yen Wuchen, you are also a hero of your generation. Let me ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you do?" "I understand what you mean." Yen Wuchen laughed miserably, "Indeed, I will not be lenient. I have done things like exterminating an entire sect many times. It seems like karma has come. But this is the mistake that this old man has committed. How can I let the entire palace of myriad devils bear it together? That way, after I die, I won't have the face to face my master, I won't have the face to face the ancestors of the palace of myriad devils." After saying that, he suddenly looked at Yen Bugui and shouted, "Close your eyes." Yen Bugui, whose face was covered in blood, looked at his father in confusion. When he saw the sword in his father's hand, he immediately understood everything. He knelt in front of his father and kowtowed while crying, "It is all because of your unfilial son that I caused this disaster, father. Your son's death will not be regretted. In my next life, I will serve you again even if I have to be an ox or a horse." Yen Wuchen was so emotional that his face was trembling. He grabbed Yen Bugui's hair with one hand and raised the sword in the other. Bu Yun Xiao and Qiu Wuyuan screamed and knelt down, hugging him, "Master, don't." Yen Wuchen was indeed a fierce and ambitious person. He could win and lose. He kicked his two disciples away and shouted, "Now that things have come to this, don't be stupid." There was a flash of silver light in his hand and his son's hot blood sprayed on him. "Eldest martial brother." Bu Yun Xiao and Qiu Wuyuan exclaimed in unison. Yen Wuchen held his sword in one hand and his son's head in the other. He faced Yu Qianqiu with his eyes wide open and shouted in a sorrowful voice, "We will bear the consequences of our mistakes. Yu Qianqiu, please let the rest of the 10,000 demons go. I will repay you in my next life." Then, he threw his son's head away and grabbed his messy hair with one hand. The sword in his other hand flashed, and the hot blood rushed to the sky. "Master!" The two disciples cried in sorrow. Yen Wuchen didn't fall even after he cut off his own head. He threw his head away forcefully, and his body lost its center of gravity and fell backward into the arms of two disciples. Following the death of the father and son, the resentment that had accumulated in the hearts of the people of the myriad demons' palace also dissipated when the two heads fell to the ground. The Yen father and son had finally given the myriad demons' palace an explanation. The remaining several hundred disciples of the myriad demons' palace all knelt down and kowtowed to Yen Wuchen's headless corpse. Many of them were so moved by Yen Wuchen's act of sacrifice that they choked with sobs. Coupled with the countless corpses that had died tragically all around them, the atmosphere down below became extremely gloomy. Yu Qianqiu silently looked at Yen Wuchen's headless body. After a long time, he squinted his eyes and pointed at third brother Xian. He said to Zhangpeng, "He won't die for now." Zhangpeng immediately teleported down and restrained the unprepared third brother Xian. In the blink of an eye, he flashed back into the sky. However, the meaning of Yu Qianqiu's words was very clear. The people below immediately cursed. Qiu Wuyuan hugged his master's headless body and shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, you will die a horrible death." Man Hu and his fellow disciples fearlessly rushed towards Yu Qianqiu and shouted in unison, "Avenge master." Zhang Peng waved his hand and directly ordered, "Kill." Chapter 965. Senior brother Man Hu and the others knew that it was impossible for them to escape from Yu Qianqiu alive. Hence, they decided to self-detonate their dantian and kill Yu Qianqiu to avenge their master Bingchengzi. However, the difference in cultivation between the two sides was too great. Before they could reach the sky, countless rays of light shot towards them and turned them into a rain of blood. Even though the remaining several hundred disciples of the myriad demons' palace were united against a common enemy, it was impossible for them to withstand the attacks of 3,000 immortal experts. In an instant, fierce rays of light blinded their eyes, and miserable screams rang out incessantly. In just a short moment, not a single corpse could be found on the ground. Severed limbs and a bloody mess covered the ground, and the thick smell of blood was suffocating. Following Zhang Peng's order, the 3,000 members of the heroes quickly scattered in all directions to search for survivors. Floating in the air, Yu Qianqiu took out a spirit awakening pill and slapped it into the mouth of third Xiaofan, who was clamped under Zhang Peng's arm. At this moment, a groan came from the pile of corpses. Yu Qianqiu and Zhang Peng looked over in surprise. They didn't expect that someone could survive such a fierce attack. The broken limbs were lifted up, and a bloody man sat up. To be exact, he didn't have the lower half of his body, and there was a big hole in his chest. It was a miracle that he didn't die, but he wasn't far from death. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and recognized Qiu Wuyuan. Qiu Wuyuan was gasping for breath, and it seemed that he could collapse at any time. Fortunately, his arms were still in good condition, and he supported the lower half of his body. After turning his head around, he realized that the corpses of his master and senior martial brother were nowhere to be found. He couldn't help but start crying. He was supposed to be bawling, but the lower half of his body was leaking air. In the end, he cried like a female ghost who had died an unjust death. His voice was hoarse, and it made people panic. His tears could no longer flow. He tried his best to look around, hoping to find a fellow disciple who was still alive. However, how could he find a complete corpse in a pool of blood? Who knew that when he moved a little too much, half of his body would sway, and his arms would clumsily support his back? When he stabilized his body, he saw Yu Qianqiu in the air. Their gazes intertwined and became extremely complicated. The enmity between them had already vanished like smoke in thin air, and the gazes they used to look at each other had returned to the distant past. Yu Qianqiu remembered the difficult days after he entered the cultivation world. He was lucky enough to not die in Onquangsong. After he escaped from Onquangsong like a stray dog, he didn't dare to come out and hide in the pillar of the state general's residence. Later, he met Guan Yu, and under Guan Yu's lead, he went to the Hundred Flowers Valley. It was in the Hundred Flowers Valley's Hundred Flowers house that he met a slightly sloppy old man. The two of them were drinking and chatting at the same table. That sloppy old man was Qiu Wuyuan, who was now on the brink of death. That was the first time he met Qiu Wuyuan. After that, the encounters between the two of them appeared before Yu Qianqiu's eyes like smoke. He really couldn't match the bloody man in front of him who was about to die. Yu Qianqiu almost couldn't remember anything else. These years had passed in a hurry. He had always been busy searching for the supreme path, wanting to break free from the misfortune of his previous life. Many people and matters had been left behind by him one by one. In short, he had killed a lot of people, and his hands were stained with blood. He didn't know if it was because he was really cruel, or because he had always been estranged from the people and things in this world. The first thing that came to Qiu Wuyuan's mind was the scene in the Hundred Flowers house. He met two young men while drinking alone. One of them was the guy who flattered him, Yu Qianqiu, in front of him. As for the other one, he didn't seem to have seen him again. After they parted ways, he only had a slight impression of this flattering young man because he was a little interesting. He didn't even think that he would meet him again, because he was just an insignificant individual cultivator. His status was worlds apart from his. However, after so many years, the rise of this young man could be called a miracle. Many people couldn't stop him even if they wanted to. As a result, he walked step by step to where he was today. He was even strong enough to destroy 10,000 demons with a wave of his hand. If he had known this earlier, he would have killed him to prevent future troubles. But who would have thought that this day would come? Who would pay any attention to an insignificant wandering cultivator? Things are human, not. Xiao Wuyuan's throat spat out a few inaudible words. His eyes that were looking at the sky gradually became dull and lifeless. Bang! Zhang Peng slashed out a ray of light and blew him into pieces on the spot. Yu Qianqiu was also startled by this sound and woke up from his memories. Looking at the scene of corpses below him, his Adam's apple moved slightly. When he turned to glance at Zhang Peng, he saw that third Xian's eyes were unfocused and his face was ashen. It was obvious that he had remembered something. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath of the air that was filled with the thick smell of blood. He looked at third Xian and sneered, "Third Xian, you've finally woken up. You must have had this dream for a long time. Did you remember anything?" Zhang Peng immediately grabbed the back of third Xian's neck by his clothes and dragged him in front of Yu Qianqiu. Third Xian slowly raised his bloody face and looked at Yu Qianqiu with a bitter expression. Yu Qianqiu, let me go back to Lingfang Valley and find my master to apologize. I will cut my throat in front of my master. You don't have to do it. Lingfang Valley? Your master? Yu Qianqiu laughed as if he had heard a funny joke. He shook his head and said, with your help, Lingfang Valley has long been destroyed by Yan Zhuixing. In order to save your brothers, your master was humiliated by Yan Zhuixing. He almost lost his life. As for your brothers, none of them were spared. All of them were killed by Yan Zhuixing. Today's Lingfang Valley has already become a barren mountain. Your master has also left disheartened. Only the souls of your brothers are lingering here. You're just an animal that helps a tiger do evil. What do you want to go back to see? After hearing this, third Xian looked at Yu Qianqiu with fear in his eyes. It was as if he had seen a ghost. His chest was heaving up and down and he was holding his breath. But in the end, he could not hold his breath. He spat out a mouthful of blood and asked in a trembling voice, "Is what you said true? Yan Zhuixing never abandoned you and kept you by his side. He trusted you so much. Didn't he tell you about this?" Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and said, "Everyone in the cultivation world knows about this. If it weren't for our friendship, you would have died by my hands long ago. Do you think there's any point in me lying to you?" Third brother Xian was stunned like a wooden chicken. After struggling for a long time, Yu Qianqiu signaled Zhang Peng to let go and said, "For the sake of your master, I won't kill you. Get lost." "Where's my master? I want to see her." Third Xian asked with a bleak expression. "I think you can forget about that. Your master has finally recovered from her sadness and despair. It would be strange if she didn't get agitated when she sees you." Yu Qianqiu sneered. "I understand." Third brother Xian nodded silently. He took out a jade archive from his storage pouch and wrote something on it. After he was done, he handed it to Yu Qianqiu and said, "I'll have to trouble you to pass this to my master." "That won't be a problem." Yu Qianqiu received the jade archive and skimmed through its contents. He was shocked and shouted, "Old third Xian, you." However, he was too late to stop old third Xian. He saw old third Xian's chest puff out as a hole appeared where his heart should have been. Finally, blood gushed out of his mouth. It was unclear what old third Xian was mumbling, but it was probably some sort of apology. Then, old third Xian plummeted to the ground. Yu Qianzhou held the jade archive in his hand as he watched third brother Xian fall from the sky. He was speechless. Initially, he wanted to incite third brother Xian to help him be a spy. Based on his understanding of Yan Zhuixing, he wanted to see if he could find Yan Zhuixing. Who knew that he might have overdone it? Instead of seeking revenge, Yan Zhuixing felt guilty and committed suicide by exploding his heart meridian. What a mess! Yu Qianzhou looked at the jade archive in his hand. It was filled with words of apology to Lu Yanqing. His reaction was a little slow. Damn it! You sure have it easy. You committed a bunch of mistakes and yet you don't know how to repent. You just die. Yu Qianzhou muttered as he looked down. When he raised his head, the 3,000 men had returned. Zhang Peng took a head count and reported. Yu Qianzhou looked around and waved his hand expressionlessly. Everyone disappeared into thin air. However, all that was left were ruins. The corpses in the pools of blood painted a picture of the aftermath of a great battle. As the thick smell of blood spread, it soon attracted a large number of eagles and other birds to circle in the sky. The carnivores hiding deep in the mountains also began to poke their heads out of their caves. Smelling the blood in the air, they became unusually excited and restless. In the sky above the back mountain of the 100 Flowers Valley, Amano and Li Qiuxiang hung their heads in fear behind Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou looked deeply at the magnificent 100 Flowers Palace on the top of the mountain in the distance. He had wanted to bring people to destroy the 100 Flowers Palace in one fell swoop, but when he recalled Qiu Wuyuan's gaze before he died, a string in his heart moved. He remembered his promise to Ma Jiugu of Fu Xian Island, that he would take care of Bai Hua Fairy and her daughter. It was also because of this that he did not bring back the 3,000 men from the 10,000 demons to the realm of gods after sending them back to the 100 Flowers Valley. Otherwise, according to his previous plan, the 100 Flowers Valley would not be able to escape. Even so, he still had to do what he had to do. This time, he would not stop until he killed Yan Zhuixing. It won't be long before Mo Xiaojun and Hai Wei come to the 100 Flowers Valley. After you meet up, go to the Hong Gang and Qin Gang to assist Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun. When you see them, tell them to spread the news along with the forces of the World Commerce Association. Yu Qianzhou immediately told them about the destruction of the 10,000 demons, especially the tragic scene of Yan Wuchen and Yan Bugui committing suicide. He wanted to see if Yan Zhuixing would come to seek revenge after hearing about this. Chapter 966. The atmosphere in the 100 Flowers Valley was still the same, the style that had lasted for many years had never changed. However, compared to usual, the atmosphere was a bit different. The reason was naturally because Yan Zhuixing had caused Yu Qianzhou to order his men to attack the 10,000 demons. Many people were guessing that the next target would be Bai Hua Palace. While people were whispering in the streets and alleys of the 100 Flowers Valley, there was a sudden explosion in the sky. Even the ground trembled. Everyone looked up in shock, only to see a streak of light forcefully breaking through the defensive formation of the 100 Flowers Valley, directly barging in and floating in the sky. Everyone looked at the newcomer with fear. How could a person who could forcefully break through the defensive formation be ordinary? The surroundings were silent, as if everything had frozen in time. Everyone looked up at the sky without moving. The old people who had lived in the 100 Flowers Valley for a long time recognized Yu Qianzhou. After seeing that the newcomer was Yu Qianzhou, many people began to ponder. They were afraid that the newcomer had ill intentions and was looking for trouble with Bai Hua Palace. Sure enough, after Yu Qianzhou glanced down, he turned into a streak of light and directly shot towards Bai Hua Palace. Whispers immediately spread in the 100 Flowers Valley. There were already many people in Bai Hua Palace who were uneasy because Yan Zhuixing had offended Yu Qianzhou. The loud sound immediately shocked everyone in the palace. Before they could see who the newcomer was, a streak of light directly broke through the mountain gate and landed in front of Baihua Palace, standing face to face with Baihua Palace mistress who just happened to come out to see what was going on. Guan Wuxia, long time no see. Yu Qianzhou stared coldly at Baihua Fairy and directly called out her name. It sounded like he had come with ill intentions. Baihua Fairy looked at Yu Qianzhou with a complicated expression. She had naturally heard about how her son was heavily wounded by Yu Qianzhou and had to run away. Facing Yu Qianzhou who injured her son, she didn't have much resentment. After all, it was her son who took the initiative to cause trouble this time. She only hated herself for not being able to stop her son. Now that things had come to this, it was too late to say anything. Let's do what needs to be done. Baihua Fairy slightly bowed, but didn't say anything. Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes and looked at the beautiful woman in front of him. Her hair had already turned white. Exhaustion was evident on her face. Obviously, she had not been less worried about Yan Zhuixing. Yu Qianzhou, what do you want? A figure flashed by. Yan Zixia's eyes were red and swollen as she stood in front of her mother, as if worried that Yu Qianzhou would do something to her mother. From the looks of it, she had been crying. Yu Qianzhou's gaze stopped for a bit at Yan Zixia's face, then said, "Move aside, I have something to talk to your mother about." "No." Yan Zixia protected her mother with all her might and shouted, "My brother's matter has nothing to do with my mother. If you want to kill someone, just kill me." "Ah." Yu Qianzhou coldly snorted, "Baihua Fairy, don't tell me that Yan Zhuixing didn't come to find you before he started this." He already knew from Li Qiuxiang and Tianyi that Yan Zhuixing had come, so he couldn't hide it from him even if he wanted to. "Zixia, move aside." Baihua Fairy pulled Yan Zixia away, her expression returned to normal, then extended her arm towards Yu Qianzhou. "You torture envoy, please come inside, we can talk inside." With Yu Qianzhou's current status in the cultivation world, it's already a bit inappropriate to call him by his name, so she changed to calling him torture envoy. Yu Qianzhou didn't bother being polite with her, quickly walked past the mother and daughter pair, walking straight into the main hall and stood there with his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't plan to do anything to Baihua Palace this time, but a warning was unavoidable. Baihua Fairy held her daughter's hand, telling her not to worry, then waved her hand at the panicking crowd outside, signaling them to leave. She then slowly walked behind Yu Qianzhou and asked, "Torture envoy, what brings you here today?" "Guan Wuxia, why do you ask when you already know the answer?" As soon as Yu Qianzhou turned around, he stopped talking and looked outside, only to see two figures landing outside the palace gate. Baihua Fairy also turned around to look, then exclaimed in surprise, "Great-grand-aunt." She quickly went over to support the person. Yan Zixia also called out, "Great-grand-aunt." The mother and daughter both supported the person. The clang-clang sound of walking sticks could be heard. The newcomers were none other than Ma Jiugu of Fuxian Island, and Ferdinand. With Baihua Fairy's support, Ma Jiugu slowly walked over with her crutches. Her face was already showing signs of old age, it seems that her lifespan is almost up. Yu Qianzhou looked at Ferdinand with a questioning gaze, but Ferdinand shook his head with a wry smile and sent his voice back. "Jiugu heard that you injured Yan Zhuixing and gave the order to deal with the 10,000 demons, so she was worried that you would attack Baihua Palace again, so she dragged me here with her. I had no choice." Yu Qianzhou looked at Ma Jiugu who was slowly walking over and understood her intentions. She was afraid that he wouldn't be able to protect Baihua Fairy and her daughter, so she dragged her father-in-law here. In fact, the fact that Ferdinand was his father-in-law was only known by the higher-ups of Fuxian Island. Outsiders were strictly forbidden from knowing, so Ma Jiugu was naturally one of those who knew. Ma Jiugu opened her drooping eyelids and laughed. "It seems that my old bones came just in time, just in time." She then walked in front of Yu Qianzhou, cupped her hands and bowed, "Greetings, torture envoy." "Isn't this disgusting?" Yu Qianzhou's expression twitched. This old woman's greeting really made him feel uncomfortable. He immediately reached out to support her, then bowed, "Greetings, Jyogu." Ma Jyogu immediately nodded and praised, "Good, good, good. It seems that I didn't misjudge you." She first put on a hat, then asked, "I heard that Torture Envoy has issued a decree to eradicate the 10,000 demons. Unfortunately, I'm old and useless, otherwise, would definitely follow Torture Envoy's decree and take the lead to eradicate the 10,000 demons. Please forgive me, Torture Envoy." Saying so, she bowed again and apologized. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He had already experienced this old woman's temperament. She was an old woman who hid a needle in a velvet glove, but he couldn't do anything to her. After all, she had helped him several times. Left with no choice, he quickly bowed and supported Ma Jyogu. "I dare not. I can order anyone, but I dare not order you." However, Yu Qianqiu was not prepared to let the other party casually manipulate him. The hierarchy of people was a matter of status. He had to protect what he needed to protect. Immediately, he said, "Besides, the matter of the myriad demons palace has already been resolved. I have already sent people to flatten the myriad demons palace." Yan Wuchen, the culprit who connived with Yan Zhuixing, apologized in public and personally cut off the head of his son Yan Bugui, then committed suicide. The matter of the 10,000 demons is over, so Jyogu doesn't need to worry about it. As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere in the hall suddenly changed. Yu Qianqiu could feel that Ma Jyogu's arm, which he was supporting, slightly trembled. Ferdinand was even more dumbfounded as he looked at him. He didn't expect him to eradicate the #1 demonic sect so quickly. In fact, not much time had passed since the 10,000 demons were eradicated. Yu Qianqiu directly teleported here after finishing the matter over there, so the news didn't have time to spread out. Naturally, no one else knew about it. Yan Bugui is dead. Bai Hua Fairy's face instantly turned pale, and her body staggered a few steps back. In fact, she and Yan Bugui had always had a good relationship. They were forced to separate because they had no other choice. Now that she heard that her husband was dead, she couldn't take the blow. "You killed my father. I'm going to kill you." Yan Zixia suddenly roared crazily after a moment of absent-mindedness. She rushed towards Yu Qianqiu, but before she could touch Yu Qianqiu, she was hit by Ma Jyogu's demon slayer staff and fainted on the spot. Chapter 967. Ma Jyogu ignored her, and now was not the time to care about her. There were more important things to deal with. She turned her head to look at the absent-minded Bai Hua Fairy, then looked at Yu Qianqiu and said with a smile, "Torture Envoy, you are indeed swift and decisive. May I ask if you are here because that unfilial son of Mu Shui has caused trouble and wants to implicate Bai Hua Palace?" Jyogu is wise. Yu Qianqiu followed up on her words. Yan Zhuixing's demonic technique is extremely vicious and has endangered the safety of the entire cultivation world. Before he came out to cause trouble, he came to Bai Hua Palace and met with Bai Hua Fairy, but Bai Hua Fairy concealed it and almost caused a disaster. This is tantamount to becoming the enemy of the entire cultivation world. If he is not punished severely, I'm afraid it will be difficult to convince the public. Ferdinand looked at him speechlessly. However, the winner is king, and the loser is the bandit. The winner is always right, so what can others do? Ma Jyogu naturally understood this, but she still nodded in agreement. "Torture Envoy, I deeply admire you for taking care of the safety of the entire cultivation world. However, it is innate for a mother and son to be connected. How many mothers in the world would harm their own son? Moreover, Mu Shui had only met Yan Zhuixing once and did not help him with anything. This meant that Mu Shui still had a clear view of what was right and what was wrong. She shouldn't be implicated. Don't you think so, Torture Envoy?" Yu Qianqiu looked at this seemingly slow-witted but actually shrewd old woman in front of him and felt a bit of admiration for her. She was already past her prime, but she still ran around for the sake of a younger generation. It was truly admirable. But he still insisted, Jiogu is right, but if I don't punish him severely, it will be difficult to convince the public. If this matter is spread out and someone else helps Yan Zhuixing, how can I deal with it? Ma Jiogu slowly turned her head to look at the absent-minded Bai Hua fairy, then said, I'm sure that only the few of us here know about this matter. If Torture Lord is willing to spare the mother and daughter, I guarantee that no one else will leak this matter, otherwise, Torture Lord can blame it on this old lady. Saying so, she looked at Ferdinand. Ferdinand can be a witness. Hearing this, Ferdinand smiled bitterly in his heart. She wanted him to speak, so he coughed and looked at Yu Qianzhou and said, I can vouch for the mother and daughter, to ensure that this matter will not be leaked out. Otherwise, I will be held accountable. Ma Jiogu nodded with satisfaction. This was exactly what she wanted. Yu Qianzhou's eyes flickered as he looked at the two of them. He remained silent and appeared to be in a difficult position. He wasn't in a hurry to answer. He just wanted to waste his time here. Ma Jiogu didn't expect Yu Qianzhou to still refuse to let go even after Ferdinand had spoken. After thinking for a long time, she frowned and said, I remember that Torture Lord had promised me to protect the mother and daughter. Do you still remember it? Yu Qianzhou snorted in his heart. He was waiting for this sentence. Yan Zhuixing had used his women to threaten him twice. If he still wanted to protect his mother and sister, wouldn't that make him even more unscrupulous? He immediately said in a deep voice, this is completely different from my promise to protect them. Don't tell me I still have to protect them if they join forces with Yan Zhuixing to take my life one day? However, since Aunt Jiu brought up my original promise to talk about this matter, I will let the mother and daughter go today. It will be as if the original promise was used up by the mother and daughter. From now on, I will have nothing to do with them. Ma Jiogu was stunned for a moment, then shook her head. With her shrewdness, she immediately understood. She smiled bitterly and said, so you were waiting for me here. But it's fine. Since I don't have the intention, why should I force it? Saying so, she walked towards the absent-minded Bai Hua fairy with her crutch, held her hand, and sighed, girl. Your man is useless, and your son is causing trouble. What's the point of staying here? Come, let's go home. Go home? Where is my home? Broken, scattered. Bai Hua fairy recovered from her trance and looked at Ma Jiogu with tears in her eyes. Girl, don't cry. Go back to supporting Immortal Island. Supporting Immortal Island will always be your home. Live a peaceful life from now on. Let the men fight for the things here. What does it have to do with us women? If we continue to get involved, the ones who will be hurt will always be us women. Ma Jiogu turned around and nodded at Ferdinand. She no longer paid attention to Yu Qianzhou and held Bai Hua fairy's hand as she walked outside. Ferdinand immediately picked up Yan Zixia who had fainted on the ground. Before leaving, he sent his voice to Yu Qianzhou, how is Furong? Yu Qianzhou didn't hide it from him and replied, Furong is fine. I have brought her to the immortal realm. You don't have to worry. The immortal realm. Ferdinand was shocked. He didn't expect that Yu Qianzhou had reached the point where he could travel between the immortal world and the mortal world. He nodded with relief and didn't say anything more. Holding Yan Zixia in his arms, he caught up with Ma Jiogu, who was outside the palace gate, and flew away together. The huge palace was deserted. Only Yu Qianzhou was left standing alone with his hands behind his back. He was lost in his thoughts. The days when he was with Yan Zixia on Fuxian Island appeared in front of his eyes. But today, he took a deep breath, got rid of all distracting thoughts, and disappeared. A woman's giggling could be heard from inside Wenqing Palace. A beautiful woman with her beautiful hair tied up in a bun was constantly jumping and dodging, waving the long gauze behind her to tease the little boy who was chasing after her. The little boy had big bright eyes, delicate and cute. He playfully chased after the fluttering gauze. His charmingly naive appearance made the woman chuckle incessantly. "Mother, I caught it, I caught it." The little boy grabbed the fluttering palace gauze and cheered. However, he found that his mother was motionless with her back facing him. He ran over and grabbed his mother's hand, shaking it. "Mother, mother." He raised his head and stared with his big eyes as if he wanted to call back his mother's attention. However, his mother looked at the door and shouted, "Who are you? How dare you trespass here? Guards, guards!" But the strange thing was that after she shouted a few times, not a single guard came in. The surroundings were silent. The little boy turned around and saw an unfamiliar man with a pale face slowly walking in without any expression. He quickly stood in front of his mother and shouted with a childish voice, "Audacious slave, get out of here." Sure enough, dragons give birth to dragons and phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, the environment dictated it. The person who came was none other than Yan Zhuixing, who had transformed into Xiaofan. After he was severely injured by Yu Qianqiu, he hid within the borders of the Dayang kingdom. Who would have thought that after capturing a few girls to restore his body, it would immediately alarm a lot of cultivators who came to search everywhere. He couldn't understand how a few insignificant mortal girls could cause such a big movement in the cultivation world. After he took the opportunity to capture a person to ask, he found out that Yu Qianqiu had already ordered the entire world that as long as a woman disappeared or died without reason, it could be Yan Zhuixing's doing. The local forces must investigate clearly, or else they would be severely punished. After knowing the details, Yan Zhuixing immediately gnashed his teeth in anger. Yu Qianqiu obviously knew that he needed a woman to heal him after he was injured, so he set up a large net in the whole world to capture him. It was obvious that he didn't want to give him a chance to recover his injuries and cultivation, and he wanted to force him into a hopeless situation. However, even though he was angry, he had already experienced the high cultivation of Yu Qianqiu. He was not his opponent at all. Previously, he never thought that Yu Qianqiu would have something in his hands that could restrain his devil blade. Now that he had not recovered from his serious injuries, it was even more impossible for him to be his opponent. If he was accidentally caught by Yu Qianqiu again, Yu Qianqiu would definitely not allow him to escape easily. It might be the time of his death. After several failures, Yan Zhuixing dared not take risks easily anymore. He could already imagine where he might go. With Yu Qianqiu's monstrous power, he might have already sent people to wait for him. Once Yu Qianqiu discovered Xiaofan, Yu Qianqiu would definitely rush over to kill him. From the looks of it, Xiaofan knew that Yu Qianqiu was determined to kill him. For a moment, he realized that he couldn't find a place in the entire world where he could hide and recuperate. He couldn't help but feel extremely miserable. He realized that he was indeed no different from a stray dog. He was a stray dog that everyone wanted to beat up. However, heaven never bars one's way. He inadvertently thought of the literati of one country who he had sex with in the past. At that time, because of a moment of tenderness for the literati, he controlled the cultivators of the imperial palace of one country to protect her before he left. Even the emperor of one country was under his control. At that time, it was mainly because he was afraid that if something happened to him, no one would take care of the literati that he had tenderness for, so he didn't expose those people under his control. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt a glimmer of hope. If he trespassed into another country's palace, he might be discovered by the hidden cultivators protecting him. It was not a good idea to take risks in the current situation, but it was different in one country's palace. Most importantly, there were countless palace maids in the palace. With his control over one country's palace, he could find some palace maids to restore his body and cultivation. As long as the people in the palace didn't leak it, who would find out? Therefore, this scene happened. Yan Zhuixing looked at the child in surprise. He heard the child calling his mother from outside. He looked around and saw no other woman except for the young woman in front of him. Could it be that the literati was the child's mother, and the literati was already married? But he felt that it was not right. Without his permission, how could the emperor of by one country let the literati marry someone else? Even if she was married, according to the rules of by one country, how could the palace master still live in the palace? Moreover, there were no signs of other men in the room. Guards! Guards! The literati shouted a few more times, but there was still no movement around. Looking at the cold and unfamiliar man in front of her, she couldn't help but panic. The palace maids and guards outside were all absolutely loyal people that man had left for her. Apart from her, even her brother, the emperor, couldn't order them around. Now that there was no movement, the situation could be imagined. The literati immediately pulled her son behind her to protect him. She looked at the man in horror and asked, "Who are you? Why did you trespass here?" Chapter 968. Princess Wenqing, you are indeed a forgetful person. Yan Juexing sneered. A mass of black murderous aura came out from his body and wrapped around his whole body. When the black murderous aura was sucked back into his body, his original appearance was revealed. However, his face was still pale, which was the result of his serious injuries. Yan Juexing. Hipster's voice was trembling. She looked outside the palace and suddenly understood everything. No wonder there was no response from the people outside. It turned out that he had returned. In an instant, tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes and slid down her cheeks. The child who popped his head out from behind her saw Yan Juexing's body emitting black smoke and shrank back in fear. However, when he saw his mother choking and crying, he came out like a little adult. He crossed his arms in front of him and said in a childish voice, "Don't hurt my mother." However, it was obvious that the little adult was shivering. He had never seen someone who could change his appearance. Obviously, he was still afraid. However, in order to protect his mother, he still stood out resolutely. "She is your mother?" Yan Juexing snorted. He grabbed the child's clothes and brought him in front of him. He said indifferently, "Who is your father? If you don't tell me, I will throw you to death." Someone actually touched his woman. It was easy to imagine his mood. The child immediately waved his fists and kicked his legs. He shouted in the air, "Bold slave, let me go. My father is the most powerful person in the world. If my father comes and sees you bullying my mother and me, he will not forgive you." Yan Juexing was slightly stunned. The most powerful person in the world couldn't be Yu Qianqiu, right? He thought it was ridiculous. He immediately snorted, "Then I would like to see your most powerful father in the world. Tell me. What is your father's name? Where is he?" As he said, he raised the child over his head and was about to throw him. "Bold slave, my father is Yan Juexing. Let me go, or my father will not forgive you." The child was still struggling stubbornly. However, the name he said stunned Yan Juexing. After a shiver, he slowly turned around and looked at Wenqing in disbelief with a questioning look. Tears gushed out of Wenqing's eyes. She bit her lips and nodded to Yan Juexing, indicating that he was his son. Yan Juexing was stunned on the spot. Hipster walked up to him and easily took the child from his arms. She comforted the child who was glaring at Yan Juexing angrily and said with a choked voice, "Yun, he is the father that you miss every day. Mother lied to me. He is a bad person. My mother said that my father loves me the most. This person bullied me. He is not my father." The child pointed at Yan Juexing's nose and said. Yan Juexing swallowed his saliva with difficulty and asked with a trembling voice, "You said he's my son?" He couldn't believe that he actually had a son after just one night with Hipster Qing. Hipster nodded again and said with tears in her eyes, "Not long after you left, I found out that I was pregnant. I was full of joy and looked forward to giving you a surprise when you came back. But I waited and waited, and you never came back. After I gave birth to Yun, for 10 months, I still waited for you to come back. But you have been gone for 6 years. Yun is already 5 years old. Why are you so cruel? You always come quietly and leave quietly. Why don't you care about my feelings? Do you know how embarrassing it is for a girl to get pregnant out of wedlock? I haven't even dared to take a step out of Wenqing Palace all these years. Have you ever thought about how painful it is for me? Have you always treated me as your plaything? You come when you want and leave when you're tired of playing with me? You don't even bother to say hello. Am I so unbearable in your eyes? If that is the case, then please leave. Don't torture me over and over again. Mother, don't cry. The child helped Wenqing wipe her tears in her arms. Then, he shouted at Yan Zhuixing, "Bad person, get lost. Otherwise, I will get someone to beat you out." Yan Zhuixing stood there motionlessly. Looking at the mother and son, he had mixed feelings. He thought that he would be beaten up like a homeless dog. He never thought that his impulsive action back then would allow him to have a home here and a son. If he had really died in the hands of Yu Qianqiu, then he would still have his flesh and blood here. The monotonous expression on Yan Zhuixing's face changed greatly. He walked over excitedly and opened his arms to embrace the mother and son. He buried his head in Hippie's ear and murmured, "I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Please forgive me. I won't come and go silently in the future. Don't worry. Don't worry. I'll never come and go silently again." What is Yun's full name? Wenqing kept whimpering and felt sad. After a long time, he choked and said, "Yan Yun, it means fleeting clouds. I thought you thought I was fleeting clouds and would never come back, so I gave him this name." Yan Yun? Yan Zhuixing pondered for a while and nodded. A swan's ambition can reach the clouds. Good name. Not bad, not bad. His son was naturally good. Yan Yun was a smart child. Although he did not understand what Yan Zhuixing and Wenqing were talking about, he understood that the stranger who said he would throw him to death was really his father. Instantly, he burst into tears. He bawled loudly, and he was extremely heartbroken. His crying made Wenqing unable to cry anymore. She pushed Yan Zhuixing away and asked the child, "Yun, what's wrong?" Yan Zhuixing was flustered. He looked at the child at a loss and said nervously, Did I not know how to control my strength and hurt him?" Yan Yun turned his head and buried it in his mother's embrace. He choked and said, "Mother lied to me. You lied to me. Father doesn't love me at all. He said he wanted to throw me to death. He is a bad person." The more he cried, the sadder he became. It was as though the sky in his heart had collapsed. He was too disappointed. Yan Zhuixing was dumbfounded. He wanted to slap himself. Why didn't he ask clearly and hit a child the moment he came in? For a moment, this infamous demon in the cultivation world was so anxious that he didn't know what to do. Sweat appeared on his forehead. He looked at Wenqing and wanted to say something but stopped. He didn't know what to say. Wenqing comforted the child in her arms with tears in her eyes. She looked at Yan Zhuixing and complained, "Don't you have anything good to coax him?" "Something good?" "Yes." Yan Zhuixing suddenly patted his head. The demonic blade flew out and floated in front of him. For him, the only good thing he had on him to please his son was the demonic blade. The sharp curved blade was shining with a blue light with red shadows. It emitted a beautiful and charming color. The dark blade had a strange demonic pattern that exuded an ancient aura. A unique and nimble crescent moon swayed on Wenqing's shoulder. Little Yan Yun only took a peek at it. His eyes suddenly lit up. He immediately looked up and wiped his tears. He stared at the demonic blade and licked his lips. He was attracted on the spot. Although Wenqing wasn't a person in the cultivation world, he could tell that it should be a weapon. He couldn't help but roll his eyes at Yan Zhuixing. He smiled through his tears and said coquettishly, is there such a thing for a child to play with? Aren't you afraid of hurting him? Yan Juixing saw that his son liked it and had stopped crying. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He waved his hand and said, "It's okay. If I don't let it hurt people, it won't hurt people." Little Yan Yun, who was crying so hard just now, immediately forgot what sadness was. After all, he had the temperament of a child. He slid down from his mother's arms. The tears on his face hadn't dried yet, but he bit a finger. He raised his head and looked at the demonic blade floating in the air. He seemed to be wondering how it could fly. Yan Juixing's eyes lit up. He immediately controlled the demonic blade to fly around the house. As expected, it attracted little Yan Yun to clap and cheer. Not to mention little Yan Yun, even Wenqing was seeing such a magical thing for the first time. His eyes lit up. He didn't know how the demon god would feel if he knew this scene. The weapon he had personally refined had become a toy for a child to play with. Not long after, little Yan Yun completely let go and chased the demonic blade around the house. However, the physical strength of a child was limited. After a long time, he naturally became tired. In the end, he hugged the demonic blade and fell asleep. Under Wenqing's guidance, Yan Juixing placed him on a small bed and gently covered him with a blanket. At this moment, the pair of husband and wife looked at each other seriously. After a moment of shyness, Wenqing asked with concern, "Why do you look so pale?" Yan Juixing shook his head and said, "You've suffered all these years." These words made Wenqing cry again. He choked and said, "It's okay for me to suffer. I'm just afraid that the child will not have a father in the future." No one would have thought that this was the unruly princess who disguised herself as a man and ran amok in the capital. Yan Juixing tilted his head to look at little Yan Yun, who was sleeping soundly. A trace of fear flashed in his eyes. If he hadn't escaped quickly, he would probably have lost his father. He gently let out a breath and comforted Wenqing in his arms. Then, he said something to Wenqing's ear and suddenly carried Wenqing horizontally. He walked towards the bed inside, causing Wenqing to exclaim shyly. The clothes of the man and woman on the bed fluttered in the wind. Not long after, two naked bodies were entangled together. Waves of panting and moaning were covered by a soundproof barrier. This time, Yan Juixing did his best to serve Wenqing, somewhat like making up for it. After the deed, the two of them hugged each other. Their hearts were connected and they talked about everything. Yan Juixing told Wenqing about his background in detail, as well as what he had experienced all these years. He didn't hide anything, including how he had suffered a few losses at the hands of Yu Qianqiu. Wenqing was just a mortal. This was the first time she had heard of the exciting and bizarre stories of the cultivation world. She was even more impressed by Yu Qianqiu, who had tried to kill Yan Juixing time and time again. Chapter 969. Princess Wenqing, you are indeed a forgetful person. Yan Juixing sneered. A mass of black murderous aura came out from his body and wrapped around his whole body. When the black murderous aura was sucked back into his body, his original appearance was revealed. However, his face was still pale, which was the result of his serious injuries. Yan Juixing. Wenqing's voice was trembling. She looked outside the palace and immediately understood everything. No wonder there was no response from the people outside. He was back. In an instant, tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes and slid down her cheeks. The child who popped his head out from behind her saw Yan Juixing's body emitting black smoke and shrank back in fear. However, when he saw his mother choking and crying, he came out like a little adult. He crossed his arms in front of him and said in a childish voice, "Don't hurt my mother." However, it was obvious that the little adult was shivering. He had never seen someone who could change his appearance. Obviously, he was still afraid. However, in order to protect his mother, he still stood out resolutely. "She is your mother?" Yan Juexing snorted. He grabbed the child's clothes and brought him in front of him. He said indifferently, "Who is your father? If you don't tell me, I will throw you to death." Someone actually touched his woman. It was easy to imagine his mood. The child immediately waved his fists and kicked his legs. He shouted in the air, "Bold slave, let me go. My father is the most powerful person in the world. If my father comes and sees you bullying my mother and me, he will not forgive you." Yan Juexing was slightly stunned. The most powerful person in the world couldn't be Yu Qianqiu, right? He thought it was ridiculous. He immediately snorted, "Then I would like to see your most powerful father in the world. Tell me. What is your father's name? Where is he?" As he said, he raised the child over his head and was about to throw him. "Bold slave, my father is Yan Juexing. Let me go, or my father will not forgive you." The child was still struggling stubbornly. However, the name he said stunned Yan Juexing. After a shiver, he slowly turned around and looked at Wenqing in disbelief with a questioning look. Hipster burst into tears and nodded to Yan Juexing with misty eyes. He bit his lips and nodded to Yan Juexing, indicating that he was his son. Yan Juexing was stunned on the spot. Hipster walked up to him and easily took the child from his arms. She comforted the child who was glaring at Yan Juexing angrily and said with a choked voice, "Yun, he is the father you miss every day. Mother lied to me. He was a bad person. Mother said that father loves me the most. This person bullied me. He is not my father." The child pointed at Yan Juexing's nose and said. Yan Juexing swallowed his saliva with difficulty and asked with a trembling voice, "You said he's my son?" He couldn't believe that he actually had a son after just one night with the hipster. Hipster nodded again and said with tears in her eyes, "Not long after you left, I found out that I was pregnant. I was full of joy and looked forward to giving you a surprise when you came back. But I waited and waited, and you never came back. After I gave birth to Yun, for 10 months, I still looked forward to your return every day. But you have been gone for 6 years. Yun is already 5 years old. Why are you so cruel? You always come quietly and leave quietly. Why don't you care about my feelings? Do you know how embarrassing it is for a girl like me to get pregnant out of wedlock? I almost didn't dare to take a step out of Wenqing Palace all these years. Have you ever thought about how painful it was for me? Have you always treated me as your plaything? You come when you want and leave when you're tired of playing with me? You don't even bother to say hello. Am I so unbearable in your eyes? If that is the case, then please leave. Don't torture me over and over again. Mother, don't cry." The child helped Hipster wipe her tears in her arms. Then, he shouted at Yan Juexing, "Bad person, get lost, or I will get someone to beat you out." Yan Juexing stood there motionlessly. Looking at the mother and son, he had mixed feelings for a moment. He thought that he would be beaten up like a homeless dog. He never thought that his impulsive action back then would give him a home here and a son. If he had really died in the hands of Yu Qianqiu, then he would still have his flesh and blood here. The monotonous expression on Yan Juexing's face changed greatly. He walked over excitedly and opened his arms to embrace the mother and son. He buried his head in Hippie's ear and murmured, "I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Please forgive me. I won't come and go silently in the future. Don't worry. Don't worry. I'll never come and go silently again." What is Yun's full name? Hippopotamus whimpered incessantly. After a long while, he choked with sobs and said, "Yan Yun, a homonym for passing clouds and smoke. I thought you thought of me as a passing cloud and would never return, so I gave him this name." Yan Yun? Yan Juexing pondered for a moment and nodded. A swan's ambition can reach the clouds. Good name. Not bad, not bad. His son was naturally good. Yan Yun was a smart child. Although he didn't quite understand what Yan Zhuixing and Hipster were talking about, he figured out that the stranger who said he would kill him was really his father. Instantly, he burst into tears. Yan Yun was a smart child. Yan Yun didn't understand what Yan Zhuixing and Hipster were talking about. He bawled loudly, and he was extremely heartbroken. His crying made Hipster unable to cry anymore. She pushed Yan Zhuixing away and asked the child, "Yun, what's wrong?" Yan Zhuixing was flustered. He looked at the child helplessly and said nervously, Did I not know how to control my strength and hurt him?" Yan Yun turned his head and buried it in his mother's embrace. He choked and said, "Mother lied to me. You lied to me. Father doesn't love me at all. He said he wanted to kill me. He is a bad person." The more he cried, the sadder he became. It was as though the sky in his heart had collapsed. He was too disappointed. Yan Zhuixing was dumbfounded. He wanted to slap himself. Why didn't he ask clearly? Why did he hit a child the moment he came in? For a moment, the notorious devil in the world of cultivators was so anxious that he didn't know what to do. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead. He looked at Hipster and wanted to say something, but then hesitated. He didn't know what to say. Hipster comforted the child in his arms with tears in his eyes. He looked at Yan Zhuixing with a good mood and complained, "Don't you have anything good to coax him? Something good?" "Yes." Yan Zhuixing suddenly patted his head. The demonic blade flew out and floated in front of him. For him, the only good thing he had was the demonic blade to please his son whom he had just met for the first time. The sharp curved blade was shining with a cold blue light with red shadows. It emitted a magnificent and charming color. The dark blade had a strange demonic pattern that exuded an ancient aura. A unique and nimble crescent moon swayed on Hipster's shoulder. Little Yan Yun only took a peek at it. His eyes suddenly lit up. He immediately raised his head and wiped his tears. He stared at the demonic blade and licked his lips. He was attracted on the spot. Although Hipster wasn't a person in the cultivation world, he could tell that it should be a weapon. He couldn't help but roll his eyes at Yan Zhuixing. He smiled through his tears and said coquettishly, "Is there such a thing for a child to play with? Aren't you afraid of hurting him?" Yan Zhuixing saw that his son liked it and had stopped crying. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He waved his hand and said, "It's okay. If I don't let it hurt people, it won't hurt people." Little Yan Yun, who was crying so hard just now, immediately forgot what sadness was. After all, he had the temperament of a child. He slid down from his mother's arms. The tears on his face had yet to dry, but he bit a finger. He raised his head and looked at the demonic blade floating in the air. He seemed to be wondering how it flew. Yan Zhuixing's eyes lit up. He immediately controlled the demonic blade to fly around the house. As expected, it attracted little Yan Yun to clap and cheer. Not to mention little Yan Yun, even Hipster was seeing such a magical thing for the first time. His eyes were full of splendor. He didn't know how the demon god would feel if he knew this scene. The divine weapon he had personally refined had become a toy for a child to play with. Not long after, little Yan Yun completely let go and chased the demonic blade around the house. However, the physical strength of a child was limited. After a long time, he naturally became tired. In the end, he hugged the demonic blade and fell asleep. Under Hipster's guidance, Yan Zhuixing placed him on a small bed and gently covered him with a blanket. At this moment, the pair of husband and wife looked at each other seriously. After a moment of embarrassment, Hipster asked with concern, "Why is your face so ugly?" Yan Zhuixing shook his head and said, "You've suffered all these years." These words made Hipster cry again. He choked and said, "It's okay for me to suffer. I'm just afraid that the child will not have a father in the future. With such an appearance, no one would have thought that this was the unruly princess who disguised herself as a man and ran amok in the capital. Yan Zhuixing tilted his head to look at little Yan Yun, who was sleeping soundly. A trace of fear flashed in his eyes. If he hadn't escaped quickly, he would probably have lost his father. He gently let out a breath and hugged Hipster in his arms to comfort her. Then, he whispered something in Hipster's ear. Suddenly, he carried Hipster in his arms and walked towards the brocade couch, causing Hipster to exclaim shyly. The clothes of the man and woman on the bed fluttered in the wind. Not long after, two naked bodies were entangled together. Waves of panting and moaning were enveloped by the soundproof barrier. This time, Yan Zhuixing did his best to serve Hipster, somewhat like making up for it. After making love, the two of them hugged each other and talked about everything. Yan Zhuixing told Hipster in detail about his background and what he had experienced all these years. He didn't hide anything, including how he suffered a few losses at the hands of Yu Qianqiu. Hipster was just a mortal. It was the first time she had heard of the exciting and bizarre stories of the cultivation world. She was even more impressed by Yu Qianqiu, who had repeatedly tried to kill Yan Zhuixing. Chapter 970. On the 22nd floor of the World Chamber of Commerce, Wei Chuanqiu left the room he had been guarding and walked slowly to the other side of the passage with a puzzled look. There was no other reason. Yu Qianqiu suddenly brought 5 women here and arranged for them to stay on the 22nd floor. Obviously, they had a special relationship with Yu Qianqiu. However, after Yu Qianqiu brought these women here, he ran away. He couldn't find them even if he wanted to solve his doubts. After some deliberation, he decided to personally investigate the matter. He had to figure out what was going on. Since his adopted daughter, Bai Suzhen, was Yu Qianqiu's woman, then what was going on with these 5 women? Nongzhu had just arranged rooms for the 5 women and went back and forth between the 5 rooms to ask how satisfied they were. As soon as he went out, he saw Wei Chuanqiu walking slowly toward him with a gloomy face and 2 big sleeves. Looking at his face, Nongzhu's heart could not help but pound. There were 25 single rooms on this floor. To avoid him, he had specially arranged these women to stay on this side. There shouldn't be any conflict with him, right? Bat King Wei. Nongzhu bowed respectfully to Wei Chuanqiu. Wei Chuanqiu looked him up and down and snorted. You're just a gigolo. I can tell at first glance that you're not a good person. He was not polite to Nongzhu at all and directly scolded him. What did he say? Nongzhu's face twitched, but she did not dare to refute him. His cultivation was much higher than hers, and she was no match for him if they fought. She could only force a smile. Are these 5 women your people or Yu Qianqiu's people? Wei Chuanqiu twirled his mustache and asked with squinted eyes. His eyes seemed to regard Nongzhu as a pimp in a brothel. Nongzhu was also a smart person. Seeing Wei Chuanqiu's attitude, he naturally would not take trouble for himself. He immediately pushed the blame away and said, they are all sect leader Yu's people. As soon as he said this, Wei Chuanqiu's face suddenly darkened. He stared coldly at Nongzhu and said in a low voice, call them out. I have something to ask them. Nongzhu felt that something was wrong and said awkwardly, Bat King, why don't you wait for sect leader Yu to come back and ask him yourself? Wei Chuanqiu snorted with a threatening tone and stared at Nongzhu with a fierce look. Nongzhu felt her scalp go numb and obediently knocked on the door one after another. Not long after, 5 different women came out obediently. They lined up in a row and stood in front of Wei Chuanqiu, trembling with fear. When Nongzhu called them out, she had already secretly transmitted a message to the 5 of them. This green-winged Bat King was an early-stage immortal emperor expert and had a bad temper. She told everyone to be careful. Wei Chuanqiu's cold gaze swept across the faces of the 5 women. Noticing that all of them were rather good-looking, she snorted coldly and said, "Tell me honestly, what is the relationship between you and Yu Qianzhou?" She then pointed to the first woman standing on the right and said, "We'll start from you. You speak first." At first, Furong was a little flustered because of Nongzhu's warning. However, she thought that since Yu Qianzhou could bring her here, he would definitely not harm her. Because of her almost blind trust in Yu Qianzhou, Furong became the calmest among the 5 women. She indifferently bowed to Wei Chuanqiu and said, "Furong greets Senior Wei. Yu Qianzhou is my man." Hearing this, Wei Chuanqiu's mustache trembled. He stared at the calm Furong for a long time before slowly moving his eyes to the next woman, Wu Lixue. Wu Lixue was a little afraid at first, but after hearing Furong's words, she threw all her fears to the back of her mind. She bit her lips and stared at Furong without moving her eyes. Sure enough, her guess was confirmed. Yu Qianzhou did not only have one woman. "Little girl, how dare you not answer this old man's question? Are you tired of living?" Wei Chuanqiu said in a gloomy voice. Yan Yu, who was standing behind Wu Lixue, immediately sent a telepathic message to remind her and secretly pulled Wu Lixue. Wu Lixue's eyes were filled with tears. She replied with an aggrieved expression, "I am Yu Qianzhou's woman." Wei Chuanqiu suddenly sneered. When his eyes moved to Yan Yu slightly bowed and said, "Me too." Nongzhu, who was standing aside, thought that these were the only 3 women. Because he had investigated Yu Qianzhou's background, he knew that the Temptress of 100 Charms next was the former lover of Yu Qianzhou's master in Onquangceng. The reason why Yu Qianzhou brought her along was that he respected her as his master's wife. However, to his astonishment, the Temptress of 100 Charms followed closely behind Yan Yu and said shamelessly, "Senior, Yu Qianzhou is my man. I am Yu Qianzhou's woman." Hearing this, Wei Chuanqiu and the other women didn't have much reaction. Unexpectedly, Nongzhu suddenly shouted angrily, "Temptress of 100 Charms, don't make irresponsible remarks. There are deities above us. How dare you be so shameless and talk nonsense? Do you want to die?" No one expected that Nongzhu would be so angry. They all looked at her in astonishment. The hostility on Wei Chuanqiu's face disappeared. After a while, he pointed at the Temptress of 100 Charms and asked Nongzhu, "Is there any secret?" "Senior, you are wise." Nongzhu made an obeisance and pointed at the Temptress of 100 Charms who was biting her lips angrily. She said, "This woman is the woman of Yu Qianzhou's former master. To be exact, she should be the wife of Yu Qianzhou's master. It's one thing for her to be shameless, but how dare she ruin Yu Qianzhou's reputation as well? Master's wife." The other women, including Wei Chuanqiu, exclaimed together. Furong, Wu Lixue, Yan Yu and Zi all looked at the Temptress of 100 Charms in disbelief. Even Yan Yu, who had spent the longest time with the Temptress of 100 Charms, did not know that the Temptress of 100 Charms was Yu Qianzhou's master's wife. If she had known, she would not have encouraged the Temptress of 100 Charms to threaten Yu Qianzhou in the purple bamboo forest in the South China Sea, because it was against human nature. No matter how open-minded Yan Yu was, it was still a little difficult for her to get through this. The seductive look on the Temptress of 100 Charms' face was completely gone. Her smooth cheeks turned pale and blood appeared on her tightly bitten lips. Obviously, she had bitten her lips. She slowly raised her head and looked at Nongzhu firmly. She said, "Yu Qianzhou is my man. I am Yu Qianzhou's woman. Bitch! How dare you talk nonsense?" Nongzhu flew into a rage and slapped the Temptress of 100 Charms' face. Pa! The slap made the Temptress of 100 Charms fall to the ground. Although the slap was not lethal, Wei Chuanqiu was inexplicably frightened. She looked at Nongzhu speechlessly and found that the toy boy was really cruel. He did not show any mercy when hitting a woman. Yu Qianzhou's master's wife said that she was Yu Qianzhou's woman. The other women were also shocked. They did not expect that such a thing would happen. They did not know what to do for a moment. The Temptress of 100 Charms, who was lying on her side on the ground, coughed slightly. Immediately, a pool of blood came out of her mouth and fell on the white floor. It could be seen that Nongzhu's slap was not light. The Temptress of 100 Charms lay on her side on the ground. She looked at the blood flowing from the corner of her mouth and remained motionless. Ze could not stand it anymore. She looked at her master resentfully and squatted down to help the Temptress of 100 Charms. Yan Yu also came to herself and followed Ze to help the Temptress of 100 Charms. Stop. Don't blame me for being rude to anyone who dares to help her. Nongzhu pointed at Ze and Yan Yu angrily. The two women looked at each other and squatted down. They did not know whether to help the Temptress of 100 Charms or not. Ze thought for a while and immediately showed the most lethal look to her master. She begged, "Master." However, this time, Nongzhu directly ignored her. She pointed at Ze and shouted, "Shut up." Ze did not dare to speak at once. "I am an upright person. I don't need anyone's pity." The Temptress of 100 Charms sat up. She pushed Ze and Yan Yu's hands away and stood up stubbornly. With blood at the corner of her mouth, she looked at Nongzhu and said, "What did I do wrong? Why did you hit me?" Slap. Nongzhu slapped the Temptress of 100 Charms again and shouted angrily, "Shameless bitch. How dare you talk back to me?" This time, the strength of the slap was obviously stronger. The Temptress of 100 Charms' hair was messed up. She fell to the ground with blood flowing from the corner of her mouth. Wei Chuanxiu, who originally wanted to come over and denounce Nongzhu, was dumbfounded and stood aside obediently. It seemed that he wanted to show that this matter had nothing to do with him. He looked at Nongzhu with a strange look as if he was saying, "Brother, you are so cruel. Are you sure that this woman has nothing to do with Yu Qianqiu? Be careful that Yu Qianqiu comes back to get even with you." The Temptress of 100 Charms only lay on the ground for a while. Then she stood up stubbornly again. She tore a piece of cloth from her sleeve and tied her messy hair behind her head. The blood at the corner of her mouth and her red and swollen cheeks could not hide the firmness in her eyes. The firmness that she would never regret. "Senior Wei, is there anything else? If not, I will go back to my room to have a rest." The Temptress of 100 Charms directly passed Nongzhu and said to Wei Chuanxiu, as if Nongzhu had never hit her. Wei Chuanxiu looked at Nongzhu and then at the Temptress of 100 Charms. He didn't know what to say. In fact, he was the culprit. If he hadn't come here to interrogate Nongzhu, such a thing would not have happened. "You are really a shameless bitch. I will kill you today in case you become a laughing stock." Nongzhu snorted coldly. She moved as fast as lightning and directly grabbed the neck of the Temptress of 100 Charms. With the cultivation of the Temptress of 100 Charms, how could she escape from Nongzhu? At this critical moment, Wei Chuanxiu suddenly moved and clamped Nongzhu's arm. He looked at Nongzhu helplessly and said, "What are you doing? I haven't finished my question and you want to kill me? You are looking down on me." He waved his hand and Nongzhu immediately retreated far away. "Girl, this gigolo said that you are Yu Qianqiu's wife, and you said that you are Yu Qianqiu's woman. What is going on? Why can't I do it?" Wei Chuanxiu frowned and said. One of the reasons why he saved the Temptress of 100 Charms was that he was curious. The most important thing was that he didn't know what Yu Qianqiu's attitude was. If he accidentally killed Yu Qianqiu's sweetheart because of him, who knew what crazy things that bad guy would do? Chapter 971. Wei Chuanxiu had interacted with Yu Qianqiu for a long time. After interacting with him for such a long time, he could tell that Yu Qianqiu was vicious and merciless. He could also do shameless flattery. However, no matter how much he changed, he could not change the insanity in his bones. It was like a kind of madness against the oppression of fate. Whoever touched his things would be oppressed and attacked by him. He had to resist fiercely. Wei Chuanqiu did not dare to go too far when his inner elixir was in Yu Qianzhou's hand. That was why he saved the enchantress from Nongzhu. There was a man who gave me up. We had no relationship. Later, that man took a disciple and died soon after. In order to avenge that man, I got to know his disciple. Maybe I fell in love with him after a long time. I don't deny that I fell in love with his disciple. It's that simple. The enchantress smiled faintly with blood on the corner of her mouth. No one knew whether she was laughing at Wei Chuanqiu or herself. She just looked at Nongzhu, who was pushed back by Wei Chuanqiu, and said, "I don't understand why I have to be the woman of an irresponsible man who abandoned me and died a long time ago. I'm not a woman who likes the new and gets tired of the old. I've done a lot for that man and almost destroyed my whole sect. Of course, this is the reason I found to comfort myself later. After I fell in love with Yu Qianzhou, I was also very conflicted. But why did he make me his wife? Now I just want to be his woman." Then she looked around and said, "I know what I did was wrong, but I don't know what I did wrong. Who can tell me a reason to persuade me so that I won't continue to do wrong?" Furong and the other girls looked at each other. Anyway, in their understanding, it must be wrong. There was no need for any reason. Anyway, it was wrong. This kind of thing should not happen. However, these girls sympathized with her now, so no one could say anything. Well. Wei Chuanqiu scratched his head and looked at Nongzhu. He immediately waved to him and said, "Toy boy, come here and tell her what she did wrong." Nongzhu walked over slowly and snorted, "Bitch. The reason is very simple. I've already said that what you're doing is against common sense." "Yes." Wei Chuanqiu nodded and said, "Doing so is against common sense. Little girl. Let go. Don't be stubborn anymore. If you continue like this, the world will not tolerate you. In the end, you'll only be the one getting hurt, and you might even drag Yu Qianzhou down with you. Besides, Yu Qianzhou wasn't a good person. Why did he have to like him? And you guys?" Wei Chuanqiu then pointed at the rest of the girls and glared at them. "I say, you can like anyone, but why do you all want to board Yu Qianzhou's pirate ship? Is that broken ship that attractive to you? I think all of you should disperse. Disperse, disperse, everyone go home." He had a good idea. He was going to disband all the women of Yu Qianzhou and let his adopted daughter, Bai Suzhen, be the only one. Otherwise, he would not feel good if Bai Suzhen shared a man with other women. However, Zi curled her lips and said, "I won't go. I'm not his woman. I'm just his friend." She thought, "I want to board the pirate ship, but the pirate ship is so sneaky that it doesn't give me a chance to do so." Of course, she could only think about it in her heart. She couldn't say it out loud, or she would die of shame. She didn't have the courage of the enchantress. To be honest, she quite admired the enchantress. Nongzhu glanced at Zi and twitched his mouth. No one knew his daughter better than him. He probably guessed what his daughter was thinking. Against common sense? The enchantress suddenly giggled and asked, "Mr. Nongzhu, how am I against common sense? Is it because I dated his master?" "Yes." Nongzhu suddenly turned around and shouted, "Bitch! The world is so big. I don't care who you find, but not Yu Qianzhou. Mr. Nongzhu, you can't convince me with this reason." The enchantress shook her head stubbornly. Nongzhu immediately shouted, "Then I'll kill you and end all troubles." "Mr. Nongzhu, you don't have to do it. If Yu Qianzhou wants me dead, he only needs to say one word, and I'll die in front of him immediately." The enchantress smiled faintly. She had long thought that there would be resistance when she was with Yu Qianzhou, but she just thought it was because of the common people's opinions and filthy words. However, she didn't care about those things at all. Since she could be called the enchantress of 100 charms by others, what kind of ugly words had she not heard before? However, she didn't expect that there would be resistance from Yu Qianqiu, which was so strong that it hurt her both physically and mentally. Nongzhu suddenly squinted her eyes and asked word by word, "Did you two do something out of line?" "No, it's just my wishful thinking," the enchantress said fearlessly. The others looked at them in silence, especially Wei Chuanxiu. He couldn't figure out why this gigolo cared so much about this matter. It seemed that he cared about it very much, and his attitude was quite extreme. "Enchantress, since you and I are from the same place, I'll give you a choice." Nongzhu waved her hand and pointed outside. "You can either leave the World Chamber of Commerce and go wherever you want, or you can die in my hands. It's up to you. My patience is limited. You'd better make a decision quickly." "I won't go anywhere. I'll wait here for Yu Qianqiu to come back. I'll only listen to him, and I won't listen to anyone else." The enchantress slowly turned around and walked straight to her room, as if she didn't care about Nongzhu's threat at all. "Bitch! I think you're tired of living," Nongzhu shouted angrily and dashed forward. However, a green shadow flashed by and was caught by Wei Chuanxiu. Wei Chuanxiu grabbed her with one hand and scratched his head with the other. "Let's wait for Yu Qianqiu to come back. What do you want to say when I come back?" The door in front of them opened and Yu Qianqiu walked out. He was stunned when he saw them in the corridor. Then, he strode over and asked suspiciously, "What are you doing?" Nongzhu pointed at the enchantress and shouted angrily, "Ask her." Yu Qianqiu looked over and saw the enchantress standing at the door, motionless with her back facing the outside. Her messy hair was tied up casually with a rag and her clothes were a little messy. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help frowning and asked, "What's wrong with you?" The enchantress didn't want Yu Qianqiu to see her embarrassed appearance. However, after hesitating for a while, she knew that she couldn't avoid what she had to face. So, she slowly turned around and said as if nothing had happened, "Nothing." However, the two palm marks on her face and the blood at the corner of her mouth made Yu Qianqiu squint and ask coldly, "Who did this?" The enchantress shook her head to show that she was fine and hoped to make peace. However, Nongzhu flashed over, pointed at her and scolded, "This bitch is shameless. How dare she say that she is your woman? I think it's better to drive her out as soon as possible so that she won't be hated by everyone." Hearing this, the enchantress immediately looked at Yu Qianqiu. The others also looked at Yu Qianqiu and wanted to know his reaction. Yu Qianqiu looked at Nongzhu expressionlessly and asked, "Did you hit her?" "I taught her a lesson for you. If Bat King Wei didn't stop me, I would have killed her." Nongzhu was still angry and said. Yu Qianqiu's expression changed unpredictably. Hui Ming was dark and gloomy for a while before he sighed and said, "We are all on the same side. What can't we talk about? Why did you hit her?" "What? She said that you are her man. Shouldn't I teach her a lesson?" Nongzhu said harshly, "Are you out of your mind? It's against common sense. Your reputation will be ruined if it is spread out." Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and shook his head. He sighed slowly and said, "Anyway, you shouldn't have hit her." The enchantress, who had always been seductive and confident, quietly turned her head to one side after hearing this. In fact, there were tears in her eyes. She really didn't ask for much. "From what you said, is there really something going on between you two?" Nongzhu said aggressively, "Is it really as she said, that you are her man and she is your woman? Have you already done something out of line?" "Nothing happened between us." Yu Qianqiu stared at Nongzhu fiercely and said, "But I won't allow anyone to hurt her, especially her. You'd better control your emotions. It's none of your business and it won't affect you. I don't want to see you do anything to her. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." He clenched his fists tightly in his sleeves. Obviously, he was trying hard to control himself. Humph. Looks like I was the one who meddled in other people's business. Nongzhu was so angry that she laughed and said, I only ask you one question. Tell me honestly, is she your woman? Everyone's gaze was focused on Yu Qianqiu, waiting to see what he would say. Yu Qianqiu's Adam's apple moved and his mouth was dry. He turned his head to look at the enchantress, who was also looking at him, and said word by word, she is not my woman. Then he suddenly looked at Nongzhu and said, are you satisfied now? Some things were just too powerful. Even if Yu Qianqiu was extremely daring, he still didn't dare to rashly cross them. The enchantress's body stiffened. She bit her lips hard, and fresh blood came out from the corner of her mouth. Ever since she made up her mind in the bamboo house, she knew what kind of price she would have to pay. Perhaps it would be a heavy price that she could not bear. Even though she was mentally prepared, she still felt a heart-wrenching pain in her chest when she heard Yu Qianqiu's words. Nongzhu glanced at them and sneered, Yu Qianqiu, you should have a bottom line. Some things should never be crossed. Otherwise, you will be infamous for thousands of years. That's all I have to say. I hope you remember what you said just now. After saying that, she walked straight to the corridor and disappeared at the top of the stairs, leaving a cold snort. Wei Chuanxiu coughed twice and said nothing. As the culprit, he also quietly floated back to where he was supposed to be. Yu Qianqiu only felt that his chest was as heavy as lead, and it was hard for him to breathe. He looked at the enchantress and asked, are you all right? The enchantress forced a smile and shook her head. Her strong confidence in facing men was nowhere to be seen. Biting her lips, she opened the door of the room and quickly closed the door after entering. Yu Qianqiu heaved a heavy sigh and said to Yanyu, go and accompany her. Yanyu nodded and quickly entered the room of the enchantress. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.